Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time when winter didn't just nip at your fingers. It barged in like an uninvited guest and made itself at home in every hearth, street and bone in England. You're going to live through one of the most terrifying winters in British memory. The kind that froze rivers solid and made even the Queen's ink pots unusable. You won't believe this, but in a time when there were no electric heaters, no thermal socks, and certainly no hot water bottles, people still tried to throw festivals on top of the ice. Alright, before you get too cozy, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe. But only if your heart says yes. And hey, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? Dim the lights, get that fan going for some background vibes, and let's chill into tonight's little adventure. You wake to silence. Not peace, not calm, just silence. It's that sort of eerie stillness that settles in right before something breaks. The wooden walls of your shared lodging aren't keeping anything out anymore. The wind doesn't howl tonight. It hisses through the gaps like a serpent, curling around your feet even as you bury them deeper into the straw mattress. Someone nearby is coughing, muffled beneath their blanket. You try not to move. Even your breath fogs into tiny puffs that vanish just as quickly as they appear. The frost has thickened in the corners of the room. You can see it now by the pale light pushing through the window slats. It looks like lace. Delicate, even beautiful, but you know better. That lacework crawled up the glass sometime after midnight, a quiet artist with deadly fingers. You reach out and touch the wall. It's like stone. Worse than stone, it feels like it hates you. Your shift, threadbare and patched, is doing little to keep the cold at bay. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders, fingers trembling as you do. Outside, the city hasn't stirred. No chimney smoke, no creak of carts, no fishmonger's call. Just the heavy air of a city that forgot how to breathe. This isn't a normal winter morning. You pull on your boots, still damp from yesterday's slush, and creak open the door. The alley beyond your house is a narrow cut of white and grey. Every rooftop is crowned with sharp spikes of frost. The barrels stacked near the tavern next door have cracked down the sides, leaking frozen ale in jagged amber ribbons. You squint at the ground. Even the rats seem to have fled. You glance at the sky. It's a strange pale blue, like something left soaking in milk. The clouds are gone, but the cold's only deepened. A man stumbles past, wrapped in every cloth he owns. His breath trails behind him like steam from a dying kettle. He doesn't even glance your way. That's when you realise your nostrils hurt. Frozen. The hairs inside them crackle. Your lips already feel split. You taste salt and iron. You trudge toward the main street, trying to remember if yesterday's market will still be open. At the corner you pass the baker's shop. The shutters are closed, and the sign hangs low. Too much ice clinging to the chains. Normally the smell of bread would be calling to you by now, but there's nothing. Just that silence again. Only when you reach the Thames do you truly understand. The river is gone, or rather it's not flowing. It's still, frozen solid. From bank to bank the once mighty Thames lies shackled beneath an armour of ice. Men stand upon it, not on boats, on the river itself. Some prod at the surface with sticks. One child skids across in worn boots, laughing until he slips and disappears behind a cart. A cart? Yes. Someone is pushing a cart across the ice. The world's flipped. You step closer, cautiously. Your breath catches as your boot meets the river. Hard, steady, cold, yes, but unmoving. It's like stepping onto glass that stretches farther than your eyes can follow. Your fingers are numb now. Your face stings with wind, but none of that matters. Because the city, London itself, has just changed shape beneath your feet. You back away slowly, Heart thudding in that dull, muted rhythm cold seems to enforce. The Thames has always moved, always carried the weight of fish, boats, gossip, waste, and dreams. Now it sits, silent and waiting, like a beast playing dead. You glance around. You're not the only one stunned. A cooper near the embankment mutters something about the devil's paws, rubbing his arms and blinking at the sky like it's responsible. Behind you, shutters creak open as more faces peer out. Some gasp, some curse. No one smiles. It's not just the river that's changed. The sound of hooves, faint, then louder, echoes oddly across the ice. You turn. A rider approaches down the main street, his horse's breath a billow of white. The beast stumbles, unsteady on the slick cobbles. The man reins it in roughly, slides off, and shouts to no one in particular. The grain barge froze in place last night. Southwark market's cut off. Not a loaf or apple coming through. A groan ripples through the small crowd. You blink. No grain, no bread. The frost creeping up your boots feels heavier now. You remember your landlord complaining about dwindling sacks in the cellar, how even rats had begun chewing through his candle supply. You thought it was just exaggeration. He always did like to moan. But now? Now you start to wonder if the hunger that's been gnawing at your gut is just the start. At your side, a woman swaddled in 2 shawls whispers, "This ain't natural. First the fog last week, now this. My dog froze in the night, stiff as a poker." Her eyes flick to the river. "Mark my words, this is witch work." You say nothing, because deep down a voice in you, one shaped by every fireside story and sermon and muttered warning, half agrees. The bells don't ring today. The church across the river usually marks the hour, but you check the sky and realise you've no idea how late it is. Everything feels suspended. The air, your breath, time itself. You finally head back toward your lodging, each step louder than it should be. You pass a cart tipped over in the street. The donkey pulling it lies in a heap. Its eye is frozen open. Someone's tried to cover it with a sack, but the cloth's stiff with ice. No one has moved it. No one wants to. Near your door, a boy, barefoot, wild-haired, crouches against the wall, hugging his knees. You toss him the heel of bread you didn't finish last night. It thuds in the snow beside him like a stone. He doesn't move. You look again. He's asleep, or trying to be. Inside, your room feels colder than outside. The frost has spread further along the beams. Someone's tried lighting the fire, but the logs hiss and steam. Damp. The chimney must be clogged with ice. You squat by the embers anyway, palms held out like a ritual. Another tenant mutters something from his blanket mound in the corner. You can't tell if he's praying or swearing. This is just the first morning. You think of the weeks ahead, of food supplies dwindling, of candles melting too fast, of people packed tighter in alehouses not for drink but for warmth. You wonder if Queen Elizabeth is cold, if her fur-lined chambers and golden gowns make any difference now, if she's wondering the same thing you are, is this winter going to end us? A drip hits your shoulder. You look up. Ice on the beams is melting from your breath alone, forming droplets that instantly refreeze mid-slide. This house, like everything else in London, is being claimed by the cold 1 inch at a time. No one said anything the day before, no warning, no omen, just the snap of the air at midnight, the sudden bite in your bones, and the world gone still by dawn. It's only day 1, and already you feel like a stranger in your own city. You return to the river that afternoon, drawn by rumours floating like mist through the streets. They say the Thames has become a road, a real one. Carts, horses, merchants, even a fiddler playing while walking the ice. You scoff at first, but then again, you've just passed 2 pigs roasting on a spit outside someone's upper floor window. The street beneath is littered with frozen peelings, crusts of ice, and the occasional apple split clean in half by the frost. A cat stares at you from a windowsill, blinking slowly, breath rising like smoke from its nostrils. The river's not just frozen, it's occupied. By the time you reach the embankment, it's midday, or what passes for it now. The sun hangs low and watery behind the clouds, giving everything a tin-coloured cast. The frost hasn't melted a bit. Instead, it's deepened, thickening over railings, rope, cloth. And the Thames, it's teeming. You blink. There's a butcher selling frozen rabbits laid neatly atop a barrel. Next to him, a girl in fingerless mitts hawks fire-starting kits made of twisted reeds and coal scrap wrapped in waxed paper. And then, by God, you spot a printing press. On the river, a broad wooden frame, ink-stained boards, a stout man cranking it with stiff hands. A boy beside him calls out, "Souvenirs, fresh pressed, proof you walked the frost." You move closer and squint at the page. A crude drawing of a man skating awkwardly, mug of ale in one hand, a goose in the other. Above him, "This man hath danced on ye Thames." You laugh. It spills from you unexpectedly, a warm puff of humanity in the cold. Someone hands you a wooden cup filled with steaming something. You sip. It's mostly water, barely wine, heated with cloves and something that tastes like old bark, but it works. The cold lets go of your fingers for a moment. A fiddler begins to play nearby. Frantic, quick strokes, a little off-key, but just enough to make a dozen people start clapping and stamping. The sound echoes strangely across the ice. You can feel it hum beneath your soles. A woman with yellow teeth and a hawthorn crown balances herself as she walks on two planks strapped to her shoes. "Look at me skates," she cackles. "Frenchmen use these from Holland." You suspect she's wrong on several counts, but it doesn't matter. The river is alive. The ice holds, for now, and everyone is pretending this is fine. You walk a little farther, marvelling. Someone set up a stall selling painted tin cups. There's a small fire crackling dangerously close to the surface, barely protected by bricks. A dog races past you, chased by 3 laughing children, all wrapped in mismatched layers of wool and linen, looking like lumpy potatoes with scarves. One man sits quietly, carving tiny wooden toys. He's bundled head to toe, only his hands exposed. They're red, raw, and moving steadily. You ask him if he's not freezing. He shrugs. When the hands stop moving, that's when you feel it. You nod. You don't want to stop either. Movement seems to be the only thing keeping people from realizing just how strange this all is, and how dangerous. Someone slips. The sound of cracking echoes, sharp and immediate. Everyone freezes. The fiddler stops. You scan the crowd, then see a man leg deep in slush, yanked back by 2 others. They laugh. He laughs. The music starts again, but that crack is still ringing in your ears. As you drift farther along the icy corridor that was once the Thames, the sheer scale of it begins to settle into your chest like weight. The river, normally untouchable and unpredictable, has been transformed into something solid, something owned. You pass a row of barrels stacked high, each one frosted over and leaking syrupy residue from tapped spigots. Mulled ale, one vendor claims. Another insists his is spiced mead. Both smell more like scorched vinegar, but they're warm, and warmth is the only currency that matters today. You nearly stumble into a tent. Yes, an actual tent. Pitched on the ice using thick ropes anchored to iron rings hammered straight into the frozen river. Inside, it's dim and smoky. A fortune-teller sits in the corner, draped in tattered velvet, cards splayed across a fur mat. Her breath clouds the air between you, and her voice is a whisper rasped by the cold. She doesn't ask your name, just leans in and mutters, "This frost won't leave easy. It's not like the others." She flips a card, a skeleton standing over a crown. "You'll see." You thank her with a coin that's so cold it sticks to your glove and step back into the light, uneasy. As you rejoin the crowd, a man yells, "Bear baiting at the West Dock. Come see if the beast slips." A few children cheer. You don't follow. Something about dragging wild animals into this spectacle makes your stomach turn, though perhaps not as much as the rat vendor you saw earlier with his sign, "Hot-skinned, 2 for a farthing." It's madness, but it's organised madness. And that's when you realise the strangest part. Someone planned this. The stalls, the ropes, the anchored tents. This isn't just spontaneous revelry. It's a full-blown frost fair. You overhear 2 older men in thick cloaks talking near a stall of gingerbread pigs. "Last one was back in 69, aye?" one says. The other nods. "But never this cold. Ink froze in my ledger this morning. Couldn't move the quill." You wander further until you reach a man carving letters into a massive plank of wood with chilled, chapped fingers. He tells you it will be a sign. "Welcome to the river market." You ask him who gave permission to build all this. He grins with a cracked lip. "Permission? Who needs a Lord Mayor when God's turned the river to street?" There's something liberating in it. No taxes, no permits, no rules, just cold, clever defiance. The same city that threw plague victims into carts and burned witches in Smithfield now dances on a frozen river like it owns the elements. A bell clangs in the distance. Someone's hung a copper pot on a rope and is charging passers-by to strike it with a stick. "1 penny for luck," a woman calls. 2 for love." You hesitate, then strike it. The sound is oddly satisfying, deep and round, echoing over the stalls. People cheer. You smile again, your face cracking from the cold. As dusk creeps in, the ice begins to glow faintly beneath lanterns set on poles and crates. Candles flicker in glass jars. The frost fair doesn't end with daylight. It transforms. Shadows stretch over the ice, long and swaying, and the sounds of stamping feet, laughter, music and creaking timber become oddly hypnotic. Still, a sliver of unease coils in your chest. You step carefully back toward the embankment, hearing the ice groan beneath you in long, aching tones. A reminder, this is still a river, still alive, still waiting. At the edge, you glance back at the lights, the banners, the bizarre little whirl that's bloomed atop winter's grip. It's beautiful. But deep down, you know this can't hold. The next morning begins not with the cry of a cock or the clang of a church bell, but with the creaking groan of ice shifting beneath the weight of 100 wagons and 1,000 stubborn feet. You're awake before the sun fully rises, though that hardly means anything this time of year. The light outside is the colour of dishwater, and it seeps through the wooden slats like regret. You haven't eaten. Not properly anyway. Yesterday's ale was thin and hot, and the crust you bought off a child with blackened fingertips tasted like it had been dropped in a snowbank and stepped on twice. But it was something. Today, you're not so lucky. The baker on Shoreditch Lane never reopened after the oven stones cracked from the cold. The chimney there burst outward in the night, scattering red bricks onto the street like some angry god had stomped on it. A few neighbours swore they heard it, loud as thunder. But you only remember waking up to the smell of scorched flour and a far-off wail. The market near Cheapside is open, if that's the word for it. Most of the stalls are shuttered or frostbitten. You watch as a woman saws through a turnip with a hacksaw, red-faced and grunting. Her fingers bleed where the skin cracked, and she presses the wound against the vegetable as if to glue it shut. A merchant waves you over. His table is laid with onions, turnips, a few carrots, and something that looks like a pear but rattles when he shakes it. 4p, he says, jabbing a finger at a single onion. And no, I'm not haggling. You walk on. A man beside you spits and mutters. Food's either hard as stone or soft as rot. Nothing in between. He's right. The cold has pickled everything. At a stall near the Guildhall you finally see bread. Loaves, dozens of them stacked high, dusted with snow like a baker's joke. But as you approach, you realise they're stiff, hard. You knock one gently and it clinks. The baker shrugs. Still food, he says. Just dunk it in broth, if you've got broth. You buy one anyway. The coins nearly stick to your fingers. You stuff the loaf into your coat and continue walking, jaw clenched against the wind. In a side alley, you pass a boy hacking at a frozen cabbage with a hammer. A woman scolds him half-heartedly from a window above. "You'll crack your teeth, Alfie." He doesn't answer. He just swings again, tongue poking out the side of his mouth, eyes hollow. The cold has changed people. They don't speak much. Eyes are narrower, shoulders tense. There's a desperation that's hard to name but easy to feel, like everyone's patience has been whittled down by the frost, and all it would take is a bump or a glare to send someone snapping like kindling. You catch a glimpse of your own reflection in an icy shop window. Your cheeks are red, nose raw, eyes glassy. You look less like a person and more like a bundle of fabric barely held together by will. You wonder if the Queen herself is eating frozen bread. Probably not. At the apothecary's stall near the church, a new offering. Boiled bones in cloudy broth, ladled into tiny cups for a fee. A crowd has formed, arguing over whose coin came first. The smell is rich and sour, like marrow and desperation. You join the queue. By the time you get your portion, the broth is already cooling. It's ladled into a cracked ceramic cup stained with previous stews and chipped around the rim. Still, it's warm. You cradle it in your hands as if it's a holy relic. The first sip nearly burns your tongue and you welcome it. The heat slides down your throat like melted coin. Oily, salty, thick. There's a sliver of something soft at the bottom. Maybe a bit of tendon, or maybe just onion peel. You don't ask. Behind you, a man growls at the vendor. "You said bone. This is just grease water," the apothecary snorts. "I said boiled bones. That's what happens after an hour. The rest's in the pot if you want to lick it." You walk away before fists fly. You've seen too many fights break out over far less this past week. Over a cracked egg, a place by a fire, even over a stray dog caught in someone's snare. Hunger scrapes manners off people like rust. By late morning the wind kicks up again, cutting along the alleys like a thief with a sharp blade. You duck into a cloth merchant's doorway to escape it. She's not selling much today. Who needs velvet when you need potatoes? But her shop is warm enough to pretend, and she lets you stand there for a few minutes in silence. She watches the frost curling in through the bottom of her door. "They say the baker's boy froze standing up last night," she murmurs, holding the peel like he was still placing loaves in the oven. You say nothing. There's nothing to say. You think back to the frost fair yesterday, the fiddler, the mulled wine, the tent with the fortune cards, and it feels like a dream now. That cheer was thin as glass. This, what you're feeling now, this is the thick of it. In a tiny courtyard off Bishopsgate, you spot a man chiselling ice off a wooden bucket. He glances up. "You know what I miss?" he says. "Soft pears." It hits you how many foods you haven't seen in weeks. No fruit, no fresh cheese. The fish stalls are empty because the nets froze in the warehouses. Even the rats are in hiding or already eaten. You heard of a family near Clerkenwell that roasted a raven, ate it feathers and all, and in all this some still cling to hope, or maybe madness. A woman near St. Paul's is selling what she claims are imported Spanish oranges, but they're hard, dull and bruised black. You lift one. It smells like vinegar and regret. Still, 3 people buy them anyway, just to remember the taste. In the back of a butcher's stall, a man has started selling frozen marrow as candles. He says they burn long if you pack them tight with straw. You don't ask who tested that theory first. The desperation has crept in, not with a scream, but with little trades like these. Things you never thought would be valuable. Crumbs of bread, bits of fat, even warm breath. And yet, here you are, considering whether to buy a meat candle. You clutch your stiff bread a little tighter. Maybe if you soak it in what's left of the bone broth, it'll soften. Maybe. You turn for home before the light fades too far. You've learnt quickly. No one wants to be out after dark now. Not just for the cold, but for what the cold does to people when no one's watching. As you walk back past shuttered stalls and cracking shutters, you hear a single voice singing a lullaby, slow and soft from somewhere above. A child's voice. It doesn't sound scared, just tired. And you realise that this is the true heart of the frost. Not the ice, not the wind, but the slow grinding down of what makes people feel human. Day by day, bite by bite. When you return to your lodging house, the door sticks. Not from ice this time, but from something even worse. Bodies. 2 of your housemates are huddled just inside the threshold, curled up on the floor near the hearth like spoons in a drawer. Blankets, coats, tablecloths. Anything that could be wrapped has been wrapped. They barely register your presence. One of them mutters a greeting through chattering teeth. The other doesn't speak at all. The hearth itself is a disaster. The embers have died, leaving only grey dust and one blackened log leaning against a cracked iron grate. Someone must have tried to relight it using scraps from a broken stool, judging by the twisted leg tossed nearby. You set down the frozen bread and dig into the kindling pile. But it's pitiful. Half a basket of damp twigs, 1 stub of candle wax, and a few pages torn from a sermon book. You almost hesitate, but the choice between warmth and the written word is an easy one tonight. As the flame sputters to life, your hands stretch out like they're reaching for something sacred. The heat is weak, but it's real. Your housemates shuffle closer, moving in tight without comment, sharing body heat like it's coin. No one speaks for a long while. You all stare into the fire like it might offer something more than warmth. Like maybe if you look hard enough it might remind you of spring. Later one of them, a thin man with a voice like torn cloth, pulls something from his coat. A turnip. Small, hard, and slightly green at the base. He offers it up like a priest presenting a relic. You raise your eyebrows. That's dinner? He shrugs. Boil it. Scrape it. Chew slow. You glance around. No pot. No water. You settle for slicing it into slivers with the side of a cracked spoon and letting the pieces rest on the edge of the hearthstone, where they soften and hiss. As the turnip warms, the conversation stirs. Someone mentions hearing about a merchant who set his warehouse ablaze just to avoid losing his stock to the frost. Another claims a group of musicians fell through the ice near Lambeth, their instruments dragging them under like anchors. Someone else swears the Queen herself has fled to Richmond, her courtiers bundled like sausages, hands too frozen to lift their goblets. You all laugh at that one. Not because it's funny, but because you need to. The fire crackles softly, casting long shadows against the walls, dancing shapes that make the room feel almost full, almost safe. Then, from the corner, the older woman who lives upstairs speaks. "They'll come knocking soon," she mutters. You glance at her. "Who?" She stares at the flames. "The chimney thieves." A silence settles again. But you've heard the stories. Men and boys slipping into houses by night, not to steal gold, but coal. They crawl down from the rooftops silent as frost and vanish with handfuls of ash and charred wood. People desperate enough to rob fire. Outside, the wind howls, again sharper now. It finds every crack in the walls and slips in like a rumour. You pull your knees to your chest and clutch the warm bread from earlier. It's no softer than a brick, but your body thanks you anyway. Every bite echoes like gravel in your teeth. You tell yourself it'll pass, that the cold must break eventually, that no winter lasts forever. But then again, this one doesn't feel like a season. It feels like a siege. That night, sleep comes in short, shallow bursts, if it comes at all. The cold has a way of keeping you tethered to the edge of wakefulness, nudging you back every time your body dares to loosen. You curl tighter, shift, tug the corner of your shawl higher, but the frost finds you anyway. It snakes along your spine, settles behind your knees, and kisses your eyelids just enough to keep them fluttering. You hear every creak of the beams above, every groan of the ice beyond the walls. Someone snores, someone coughs, and once, just once, you think you hear footsteps on the roof. Or maybe that's your mind playing tricks, crafting chimney thieves from shadow and rumour. You grip your bread crust like a charm against them, and finally drift off in a daze somewhere between dream and dread. By morning, the fire has long since died. The hearth is black. No one moves. The man with the turnip is gone. His coat remains folded by the door. A neighbour says he went out early to try the butcher's again, maybe hear if the canal ice cracked enough for shipments to move. But his boots were thin. You wonder how far he'll get before his toes stop answering. You stretch stiffly and step outside. The air greets you like a slap. You clutch your shawl close and begin the short, familiar trudge to the lane, where the firewood sellers usually squat. Except now, there are none. The patch where they gathered is empty, not abandoned, looted. Bits of broken crate, sawdust trampled into the ice, and a splintered bench are all that remain. Someone's even hacked up the wooden signpost nearby. A girl stands in the middle, holding what looks like a leg from a chair. She turns it over in her hands like it's treasure. She's no older than 12, cheeks red, eyes flat. She doesn't notice you. You turn away and walk. Your feet ache with every step, not from the cold now, but from where. Your soles have frozen and thawed too many times. The stitching groans with each move, and you fear the next puddle will soak through for good. The wind slices in from the east. You pass a row of houses with ice climbing up their outer walls like ivy. Behind a window you see someone warming their hands over a pan of coals. Coals, mind you, black gold these days. You envy them with a kind of hunger that has nothing to do with food. At the corner near Milk Street you find a new kind of trade has begun. A woman with a pushcart offers heat. Not coal, not wood, but time by her brazier. She set up a metal pot filled with ash and embers and charges by the minute to stand beside it. She even has a bell to mark the end of your turn. You pay 2 farthings and join a man with frost on his beard. He doesn't speak, only lifts his fingers slowly to the heat. One is already blackened at the tip. He holds it close, as if apologising. When your bell rings, you almost don't move. The woman clears her throat sharply and you back away, ashamed. Not far from there, 2 boys are sawing through an old doorframe. One nods at you. Oak burns hot. 3 pennies apiece. You shake your head and walk on. It's no longer about survival. It's about endurance. How long can you stand? How long can you stay upright? How long can you hold on to the pieces of comfort before they slip from your numb fingers? That night, back home, the fire is not relit. There is nothing left to burn. The word reaches you by accident. 2 chimney sweeps whispering over a shared biscuit crust, breath fogging between them as they sit on a stoop. One says it first with a kind of disbelief in his voice. They've set up stalls on the Thames again. The other scoffs. Old news. No, not stalls. Tents, rides, a puppet theatre. There's even a man walking about dressed as the Pope riding a goat. The second boy squints. The real Pope? No, you donkey. A fake one. He grins. He juggles. You don't believe them. Not at first. But your curiosity, dulled these last days by hunger and cold, twitches. Something about the image, people clowning and selling on the river itself, pulls at the frayed hem of your imagination. So you follow the trail of footsteps etched into packed snow, heading back to the same place where the ice first startled you silent. And what you find, well, they weren't lying. The Thames is no longer just a market. It's become something far stranger, a fairground. Banners ripple in the wind, their corners stiff with frost. Crates stacked into makeshift stages. Poles dug deep into the ice supporting flapping sheets of wool and canvas. Laughter echoes across the flat white span like bells, thin and bright and almost unnerving. A man in a tall red hat spins in circles on makeshift skates. Flattened pewter tankards strapped to his boots. Behind him, a painter is selling portraits done on ice blocks, each likeness sketched with charcoal and water, quickly sealed by the freeze. You hear the shriek of a piglet, not in pain, but in surprise. It's been harnessed to a child's sled. A race is beginning. A dozen other children cheer and chase after the poor beast as it skids across the ice in terror and triumph. And then you see the printing press again. It's moved, now under a heavy green awning near the centre of the river. They're offering a new design, a crude drawing of Queen Elizabeth herself smiling as she skates with arms wide, skirts billowing. The caption reads, "Her Majesty doth glide with grace upon ye frozen Thames." You laugh aloud, then glance around, surprised that you still can. You buy one for a halfpenny. Not because you believe it, but because it feels nice to pretend for a moment that the Queen might actually be out here, skirts flapping, grinning like a fool among her people. Next to the press is a man selling roasted chestnuts. You can't afford them, but the smell wraps around you like a memory. You hover just long enough for the steam to drift over your face and warm your cheeks before moving on. Deeper into the river's centre you find something even more absurd, a puppet theatre. The stage is rough and crooked, the curtains barely stitched. But there they are, two little wooden figures, bobbing up and down on sticks, reenacting a parody of Parliament arguing whether snow should be taxed. The crowd roars. A puppet representing a nobleman gets bonked repeatedly, with a sausage while shouting, "Order! Order!" And through it all the ice creaks. It never stops. You step back instinctively as the ice beneath your feet gives a sudden, drawn-out moan. No cracks, not yet. Just that eerie sound again, like a sigh from something enormous and sleeping beneath. A few heads turn. No one speaks. Then the puppet slaps the sausage again, and the crowd laughs, louder this time, just to drown out the reminder. Nearby, a woman in a bonnet is selling miracle elixirs from little bottles lined neatly on a tray. You pause, watching as she pitches her wares to a couple of sailors. Boiled from elder root, dried eel skin, and powdered frost beetle. Guarantees heat in the chest and courage in the loins. One of the men buys two. It's not just goods being sold out here, it's fantasy. Every booth, every banner, every prank and show is a small rebellion against the cold, a desperate shout of life in the face of a world gone frozen. You pass a man roasting something unidentifiable on a spit. It smells smoky and strangely sweet. He catches your glance. "Goosefoot," he says, then grins. "Well, mostly goose." A group nearby sings a bawdy tune about kissing in the frost and lighting fires with love. Their breath puffs in rhythm with the song, cheeks flushed more from the cold than the lyrics. They raise clay cups filled with some steaming brew and toast to the Ice Queen, a name the river has earned without asking. Then you see the swan, or what's left of it. Roasted to a crisp and laid out on a cracked wooden board, the regal bird now resembles something between a feast and a warning. Its long neck is arched in eternal agony, one wing outstretched. A chalk sign nearby reads, "Sixpence per slice, royal meat for common folk." You're not sure whether to be impressed or nauseated. Two boys walk past, dragging a sled behind them loaded with kindling. You can't help but stare. They must have scavenged from every abandoned doorframe and broken cart from here to Clerkenwell. One boy notices your look and shrugs. "No law on the river," he says simply, and disappears into the crowd. As dusk approaches, the sky turns violet, then bruised blue. Lanterns are lit on long poles hammered into the ice, casting flickering amber pools across the surface. A thin layer of mist begins to gather low to the ground, curling between feet and booths like smoke from a ghostly hearth. You linger near the edge of the festivities, a few pence lighter, a sliver warmer, a little more alive than you felt that morning. And yet something about the lights dancing on the river, the crack of laughter, and the darkening sky makes you uneasy. Because this fair, it shouldn't be. No one should walk on water. No one should set up puppet theatres where once floated trading ships. No one should roast royal birds or juggle dressed as the Pope. And yet here you all are, doing exactly that. Not because you want to, but because you must. Because pretending it's a festival is easier than admitting it's a crisis. The frost has turned your city into a stage, and everyone, pauper, merchant, butcher, and child, is an actor dancing on ice. You start the walk home as the river groans once more. You wake the next morning to the sound of boots slipping outside your window and the unmistakable crash of a wooden crate meeting the ground. Then silence again. That eerie stillness returns, thick as the frost on the inside of your window pane. You scrape a peephole with your sleeve and peer through. The alley's changed. A figure lies slumped near the wall, half covered by a frayed blanket stiff with rime. For a moment you think he's just sleeping off drink, but the angle of his head, the unnatural stillness of his fingers. You know better. No one moves like that unless they've stopped moving altogether. No one around you reacts. Or maybe they just don't have the energy to. The others in your lodging pass the body in silence, stepping carefully, not speaking. It's the third one this week. You swallow the rising lump in your throat and force yourself to dress. Your shirt is damp again. Nothing dries in this weather, and your boots take forever to pull on. The leather curled like hard bark. Outside, the wind bites like a knife. The path to the river is worn now, more ice than road, but at least it's familiar. You walk quickly, hands stuffed deep into your sleeves. The frost fair is still going. In fact, it's louder than ever. More stalls, more people, more foolishness. There's a man balancing on a barrel, juggling 3 frozen eels. Another has fashioned skis from fencing slats and glides in slow, clumsy arcs between booths, shouting, "Make way, couriers for Her Majesty," as people dive aside, laughing and cursing. But you're not in the mood to laugh today. You push past a vendor selling iced pies and a woman offering kisses under a sprig of frozen holly. Toward the far edge of the river, where the booths thin out and the crowds are quieter, you find them, the performers. Not musicians, not jugglers, but something stranger. A trio of men in outlandish costumes, one dressed as a devil with a bell-laced tail, another in a ruff so large it looks like he's been served on a plate, and the third cloaked in soot and feathers. They circle a low platform of ice, chanting, dancing in time, kicking up snow. A sign nearby reads, "Frost Spirit's Blessing. Pay what you wish." You watch in silence as a mother pushes her child forward, drops a farthing into a cup, and whispers something under her breath. One of the performers, face painted white and cracked from the cold, touches the boy's head gently, murmurs a phrase, and tosses a pinch of ash into the wind. It's absurd, but is also moving. For that boy, for his mother, maybe even for the performer, it means something. That in the middle of this absurd, frozen stage, there's still space for magic, or at least the idea of it. You move closer. Behind the dancers, another figure appears, an elderly man wrapped in a fur cloak stitched with bells and bones. He begins to speak, not loudly, but with a rhythm that commands attention. He tells the crowd of winters past, of the great frost of 1565 when even wine casks split in the cellars and fish were sold with icicles still hanging from their fins, of frostbitten ears lost in the alleys of Norwich, of a priest whose breath froze mid-sermon and hung in the air like a ghost. You're not sure whether he's recounting history or just telling tales, maybe both, but everyone listens. As the old man's voice continues, the crowd leans in, not just for the stories, but for the warmth of them. Strange, how words can feel like embers when the body is starved for heat. He tells of a year when birds dropped from the sky mid-flight, frozen before they hit the ground, of a town where alehouses turned into makeshift hospitals because no one could dig graves fast enough, of a woman who gave birth in the back of a fish stall, using only a blanket of eel skins and 2 candles stolen from a church. Some people chuckle, some shift uncomfortably. One man near you crosses himself, and then the old man says something that hushes the laughter completely. Do not mistake merriment for safety. Ice has no master. You blink. He meets your eyes, just for a second. Then turns back to the crowd, bowing low, bones clinking softly in the furs around his neck. His voice is gone. The moment fades. You wander back toward the heart of the fair. The crowd is thicker now, drunk on illusion. You pass a stage where 2 women duel with frozen fish. A group of men in bishops' hats pretend to bless sausages on a spit. Laughter rings out in big, booming waves, echoing across the hard river like bells from another world. But the laughter is wearing thin. You can feel it. At one booth, a man calls out to you with a grin too wide to be trusted. Care to try your fortune? He gestures to a wheel painted with symbols, stars, cups, coins, and a crude drawing of a coffin. Spin it for a farthing. Might win a rabbit, might win a riddle. You glance at the wheel, then at the prize shelf behind him. Only 1 rabbit, very still, a little too stiff. You shake your head and walk on. A group of children run past, chasing a paper kite on a string. The kite dances clumsily, fighting the wind. It's shaped like a dragon, painted green and gold, tail trailing behind. One boy slips, lands hard. He wails, but the others pull him up, brush him off. They don't stop playing. You envy them a little. Near the south bank, a strange sight catches your eye. Someone's built an entire tavern on the ice. A proper one, with benches, a plank bar, even painted signs advertising mulled wine and gentleman sausage and porridge stewed. Inside, people sit shoulder to shoulder, sharing cups, breath, warmth. Steam rises in soft curls above their heads, trapped beneath a patchwork roof stitched from sailcloth and hope. You peer inside. It's loud, alive, sweaty even. One man is singing something off-key but full-hearted, pounding the table with a mug. You think about going in, but then you hear the ice groan beneath the weight of the crowd, louder than before. You step back. The river feels different now, less steady, less sure. As you retreat toward the shore, you pass a woman selling red pages. thin sheets of waxed paper stamped with symbols. She presses one into your hand before you can protest. "For luck," she says. "Keep it near your heart." You don't know what it means. You don't ask. You just tuck it into your coat and walk on, wondering how many people are here to celebrate, and how many are here because there's simply nowhere else to go. The lights of the fair dim behind you as fog rises once more, swallowing sound and colour and sense. The sun doesn't so much rise as appear, pale and shivering above a sky the colour of old pewter. By now, your sense of time is warped beyond saving. Morning blends into evening, daylight flickers like candlelight, and all the hours in between blur under the same grey frost. You head down toward the banks again, drawn not by curiosity this time, but by hunger. Real hunger. The kind that sits heavy in your limbs and slow in your thoughts. The bread you've been nursing for days is gone. The turnip slivers are a memory. Today you need something hot, something real, and today, for once, the smell finds you. Smoke, sweet and sharp, wafts from the far side of the river. You follow it like an animal, boots crunching with each step, your breath labouring against the cold. As you near the centre of the fair, the scent thickens. Roasted meat, clove-studded cider, maybe even garlic. You blink. Ahead, a long table has been set, on the ice itself, draped in linen so stiff with frost it snaps at the corners in the wind. On it lies a banquet of sorts. Steaming stews in cracked clay pots, a roast haunch of something, goose or boar or perhaps something less honest, and platters of carrots, onions and apples so wrinkled they look more like memories of fruit. There are seats too, rough benches and overturned barrels, even a scattering of padded stools stolen from who knows where. Around the table a dozen or more people have gathered, laughing, sipping from tin cups, tearing hunks of meat with bare hands, and overseeing it all, a man in furs, cheeks flushed red, eyes bright with both firelight and drink. He lifts a mug and calls out, "To winter, to fools who eat on ice and never fall through." Cheers erupt around him. You edge closer. A boy offers you a cup. You hesitate, then accept. It's warm. Mulled cider or something like it, spiced with cloves and possibly vinegar. But it's warm, and your hands cling to the heat like it's life itself. At the far end of the table, a woman carves meat with a knife so sharp it sings against the bone. She hands out slices on slabs of bark. No plates, no questions. You take one without asking what it is. The first bite is chewy, smoky, and a little sweet. You chew slowly, trying not to imagine anything with whiskers or hooves. Hunger mutes your skepticism. Someone near you leans in. They roasted it over the fire in Old Bill's forge. Took 3 days to thaw the beast. You nod, not entirely sure you want to know what it was before that. A pot of stew makes its way around the table. You dip a chunk of bread into the murky broth, soaking up the last bits before passing it along. The steam stings your face, and you don't mind. Beside you, 2 women argue about whether the Queen herself dined on goose this week, or if she's still living on preserved cherries in some countryside manor. One swears she saw a cart full of oranges headed toward the palace gates. The other scoffs, more likely carrots, painted gold. Neither seem to care. They laugh and sip and eat like this is the best night of their lives, and in some twisted way, it might be. As the feast unfolds, you sit among strangers who feel like something else entirely, allies perhaps in this absurd war against the cold. There's a strange intimacy in sharing a fireless meal on a frozen river. No one here pretends the frost is over. But for a few hours, under the flickering glow of lanterns and oil torches, it doesn't seem to matter. The man in furs stands again and raises a glass. Let us honour the pigs, the turnips, and the brave souls who invented mustard. Laughter rolls across the table, and someone passes you a smear of something sharp and yellow on the end of a spoon. You taste it. It stings your nose, clears your sinuses, and reminds you that you're still very much alive. The stew is passed again, thinner now, but still warm. A woman from Deptford sings a sailor's tune between bites, and a man missing 2 fingers drums the rhythm on the edge of the table with his cup. Someone toasts to teeth that still chew, and another adds, and stomachs that forgive. You take another bite of the meat. This time you notice the hint of smoke, the salt rubbed into the skin, the way the fat melts along the edge of the tongue. It's not fine dining, but it's nourishment, and it tastes like survival. At some point, a thin boy climbs onto a crate and begins to recite a poem, one of his own, by the sound of it. It's clumsy, rhymed with desperation, but sincere. Frost on the river, frost in my boots, frost in my belly and frost on my roots. But give me a roast and a flask full of cheer, and I'll toast to the Thames like it's summer all year. You clap with the rest, not because it's clever, but because it's true. As the meal winds down, people begin to trade small things. Half a carrot for a pinch of salt, a wool mitten for a bit of tallow. One man offers a story in exchange for an onion. Another swaps a lullaby for a kiss on the cheek. It strikes you, sitting there among this odd parliament of the frozen. In this moment, no one's asking who's noble or poor, who owns land or owes debt, who lives in stone or straw. Out here on the ice, the only wealth is warmth, and the only power is in sharing it. Someone pours the dregs of a bottle into your cup. It's sharp, almost medicinal, but you drink anyway. Your chest warms, your shoulders loosen, your toes still hurt, but you think you can feel them again. The man in furs stands once more and declares the feast over, not with a prayer or a hymn, but with a burp that echoes across the tents. Everyone cheers. As they scatter, some head back to their homes, some curl under the benches with blankets, and a few wander off toward new fires springing up farther down the river. You stay a while longer, watching the lanterns swing in the wind. One by one, they dim. The laughter fades. The feast, like everything else in this strange frostbitten world, melts into memory. You rise, brush the crumbs from your coat, and begin the slow walk home. The river groans beneath you again, gentle but ominous. You whisper a silent thanks that tonight, for once, you didn't go to bed hungry. You're jolted awake just after dawn, not by noise but by a feeling, a shift in the air. That odd silence again, but deeper somehow, like the city is holding its breath. You lie still on your straw mat, wrapped in every garment you own, staring at the beams above you as frost creeps silently across the ceiling like ivy. Downstairs a voice is muttering. It's Mrs. Morrow, the widow in the next room. She's whispering prayers, not to God, but against something. The words are jumbled. Something about the devil hiding in the wind, about strange footprints on her roof. You hear her spit once sharply. You sit up, shaking off the stiffness in your arms. You know what this is. Not frost madness. Fear. It spreads quicker than illness in this kind of cold. All it takes is one misstep, one death too strange, one unexplained sound behind a wall, and suddenly everything's a sign, a curse, a witch. Downstairs they're talking now, loudly. A neighbour says his hens laid black eggs. Another claims his dog howled all night and then froze in place, still standing upright by the fence. And everyone keeps circling back to the same thing, Agnes Hollow. She's lived at the edge of the lane for longer than most can remember. No husband, no children, no visitors. Just a garden that always seemed to grow strange herbs, and a cat that's outlived 3 generations of rodents. You've spoken to her once or twice. She gave you dried chamomile when your sister had fever last summer. Didn't ask for coin. Just said, steep it gently, no boiling. The fever broke in 2 days. But now, in this cold, that kindness is forgotten. The firewood's gone, the food's low, and fear needs a target. You step outside, and the cold clamps down immediately. But something's different this morning. The sky is blue, not grey. A bright, flat, colourless blue that makes everything else feel sharper. The sunlight glints off the ice on rooftops like glass. Down the lane, there's movement. Neighbours clustering together in their thickest cloaks, voices rising. You hear words like curse, spell, and unholy. Someone mutters about the way her windows don't frost over like ours. You see them glance toward her house, just once. You follow their gaze. The little cottage leans inward at the edge of the lane, smothered in vines and flaking whitewash. The front window is dark. No smoke from the chimney. Then someone suggests it. Not with anger, but with that flat tone people use when they don't want to say a thing too loudly, in case it becomes real. She should be questioned. You feel your stomach twist. You've heard that tone before. It never ends with just questions. You break away from the group and head for the river. Your hands ache. Your breath comes in shallow bursts. But you'd rather face the creaking ice than the creeping suspicion growing behind those whispers. Back at the Frost Fair, the mood is different. Louder. Edgier. The laughter from yesterday sounds brittle now, forced. One booth advertises hot ale for broken souls. Another offers protective charms against chill and malice. Small wax figures, each one stabbed with a thorn, sold in pairs. One to burn, one to keep. You don't ask what they're meant for. A fiddler plays a tune just sharp enough to make you flinch. Children still run, but they don't squeal anymore. They dart like animals, heads low, arms clutched tight. There's tension on the ice, and you know, even before the first stone is lifted, that the fair isn't the only thing cracking. By midday, the whispers have calcified into action. You return from the river to find the lane thick with people. Not quite a mob, not yet, but too many to be a neighbourly visit. They're clustered near Agnes Hollow's cottage, standing in a loose half-circle like children around a bonfire they're not sure they lit on purpose. Mrs. Morrow is there, tight-lipped and trembling, a wooden cross clenched in both hands. Beside her, the butcher's apprentice holds a length of rope with the same casual grip you'd use on a basket of potatoes. A potboy from the tavern sharpens a stick into a point. No one says, "Which?" But no one has to. You push through the edge of the crowd, heart thudding. There's no real plan. That's what makes it so dangerous. In this kind of cold, reason becomes brittle. One strong voice and the whole thing could snap. Agnes emerges on her own. No fanfare, no theatrics. Just opens the door and steps out into the frost in her usual brown wool. Layers upon layers, the same patched shawl she's worn every winter since you were a child. She doesn't look frightened. She looks tired. She doesn't beg, doesn't shout. She simply says, "You're all freezing, and you think burning something will help." The crowd stirs. That word, burning, unspoken until now, suddenly possible. "She speaks of fire," someone mutters. Agnes lifts a hand. "I speak of warmth, not fury." Then she looks directly at you. "You remember the chamomile, don't you?" You do, and you remember your sister's fever breaking. But you also remember your mother crossing herself when she heard where the herbs came from. A boy throws something, just a lump of frozen snow. It hits her shoulder and explodes into a puff of powder. She doesn't flinch. A man steps forward. "Why doesn't your roof have ice?" Agnes shrugs. "I sleep with stones from the hearth. I know how to keep heat." "Unnatural heat," someone hisses. "Cleverness isn't witchcraft," she replies, though her voice is thinner now. Then the wind changes. Suddenly it's cold. Not ordinary cold. Sharp, like something slicing along your cheekbones. The crowd pulls their collars tighter, shivers running shoulder to shoulder like a single organism. Snow begins to fall, not flakes but sharp little needles that prickle as they land. Agnes looks up. Her face softens. See? She whispers. Even the sky is telling you to go home. You don't know what turns them. Maybe it's the sudden weather. Maybe it's that her calmness feels too much like reason. Or maybe, just maybe, no one wants to be the one to start something that can't be undone. They begin to drift away, slowly, muttering but moving. The rope is dropped. The stick, too. Mrs. Morrow lingers, but even she eventually shuffles off, cross still clutched like a spoon. Agnes turns and walks back inside without another word. The door shuts gently and you hear a latch fall into place. You exhale. Later, back at the fair, you notice one of the charm vendors packing up early. The booth beside it, one selling bottled smoke for protection, has vanished. The crowd is thinner, more cautious, as if everyone's remembered that fires, even little ones, can spread fast across a sheet of ice. You walk the riverbank alone for a while. The sun's beginning to sink and shadows stretch across the frost like fingers. The wind is quieter now, but the bite is no less cruel. You clutch the red page the woman gave you 2 days ago. You still don't know what it means. But somehow, pressed against your chest, it feels warmer than your coat. The wind changes again that night, not in speed or temperature, but in tone. You hear it before you see it, whistling down chimney flues and alleyways with a hollow quality, like breath caught in a throat. When morning comes, it brings a light dusting of snow, too fine to sweep and too soft to crunch, but enough to make the rooftops look like they've been sifted with flour. You wake to a pounding on the door, not angry, not frantic, rhythmic, formal. Your landlord answers, voice hoarse, and after a few words muffled by the thickness of the walls, the door creaks open. There's a pause. Then your name is called. You sit up. The frost has claimed your boots again. It takes time to get them on, time to force your arms into sleeves so stiff they might as well be boards. You descend the stairs slowly, and standing there, framed in the cold light of morning, is a messenger. Not a boy with a note, not a street runner, an official. Wool cloak, gloved hands, a crest pressed into the seal on the letter he holds out. You take it with both hands, heart thudding. It feels warmer than it should. The wax is pale green. The seal bears the symbol of the Privy Council. You don't know what that means. Not exactly. But you know who does. You follow the messenger. Not because you want to, but because you're not really given the option. You walk through slush-paved streets past shuttered stalls and frozen washing lines. The fair behind you is quiet this morning, the laughter thinner. Even the puppet booth is closed. By midday you're standing inside Whitehall Palace. It's your first time. You thought it would be gold and velvet, silks and roaring fires. Instead, it's bone-chillingly cold. Tapestries hang still as stone on the walls. A guard shows you into a chamber with tall windows rimmed in frost, where ink pots are buried under blankets, and a small brazier glows in the corner like a shy ember. There, among ministers wrapped in furs, sits Lord Burghley, William Cecil himself, advisor to the Queen, a man whose very eyebrows seem heavy with authority. He's thinner than you imagined, paler. His breath fogs as he speaks. You've walked the river, he says simply. You've seen the fair, the trade, the spirit. You nod. Your mouth is too dry to speak. He waves to a clerk beside him. Tell me what it looks like. No embellishment. You answer as best you can. You describe the puppet shows, the fish duels, the frost-bitten beggars and the red paper charms, the booths, the swan roasts, the man juggling frozen eels. You mention the creaking, the cracks beneath the revelry. Burley listens, so do the others. One scribes your words as you speak. Finally he sighs. It's worse than we thought. Parliament believes the fair is disruptive, a distraction, dangerous to commerce. You blink. It is commerce. That earns you a faint chuckle from one of the men behind him. Burley leans forward, and yet ships cannot pass. Goods cannot move. Ice is made as a carnival, and you've confirmed it. He pauses. You'll write it down. All of it. Official record. You'll be compensated. Your mouth is still dry. You nod. As you're led away, back into the halls lined with frostbitten guards and ink-stained ministers, you realise something chilling. The court isn't amused. The fair isn't just a curiosity, it's a threat. A few hours later, back on the river, you notice change. The Queen's banners have appeared, 3 poles hammered into the ice bearing her crest fluttering in the still wind. A proclamation is nailed to a post near the southern dock. You read it, lips barely moving. All commerce upon the Thames must cease within 3 days. By order of the Crown, the fair is coming to an end. The news spreads quickly, not through shouts or bells, but through the slow ripple of murmured disbelief. By nightfall, everyone at the Frost Fair knows. The Queen, your Queen, has commanded the river to fall silent again. Some scoff. What's she going to do? Melt the ice with her royal breath? Mutters a brewer as he stirs a pot of barley water thick with frost. Others worry in quiet. What happens if the booths don't close? If the Crown sends guards in, armed and armoured, to drag butchers from the ice and smash puppet theatres beneath their boots? But for now, no one moves. No one packs up. Instead, the fair burns brighter. Perhaps it's defiance. Perhaps it's fear. But something in the air has shifted. The laughter is louder, forced. The drinks are stronger, rougher, and the food suddenly more generous. It's as if everyone knows this could be the last night, and they're determined to drain it dry. You walk past a man frying onions in lard over a fire made from broken chair legs. He's humming to himself, the tune faster than the usual folk melodies. At another booth, a group of young men play cards, stakes piled high with splinters of wood and half-burned candles. A girl offers you a cup of something she calls Queen's milk. It turns out to be watered wine with melted snow and a whisper of cinnamon. You drink it anyway. And then there's the Royal Herald. You spot him near the middle of the river, flanked by 2 soldiers in chainmail, steam rising from their shoulders. He reads the proclamation aloud, voice ringing clear in the cold air, even as snow begins to fall again. All unauthorised trade upon the Thames is to be dismantled by sundown 3 days hence. People boo, not many, but enough. One man tosses a snowball that misses by a mile. The herald doesn't flinch. He finishes, rolls up the parchment and steps aside. The guards don't draw swords. They just stand and wait. A slow tension creeps across the fair like a crack in the ice. Not loud, not sudden, just there. You can feel it in the way people look at one another, in how stalls begin to close a little earlier than usual, in how the puppet theatre's curtains don't open again after dusk. You spend that night in the ale tent near the centre of the river, packed elbow to elbow with strangers, all pretending it isn't ending. The air is thick with sweat, smoke, and unspoken worry. The man beside you has tears frozen in his beard. He doesn't explain. No one asks. A fiddler begins to play. A slow tune this time. Something old. Something that sounds like goodbye. A woman stands in the corner, sketching by lamplight. She's using charcoal directly onto slats of thin wood. You peer over her shoulder. The drawing shows a crooked table with lanterns swinging above and 3 people laughing with their eyes closed. You ask her why she's drawing tonight. She shrugs. Because it won't come again. You step outside just as the wind picks up, stirring the snow into spirals. The banners flutter, the guards remain. and somewhere beneath your feet the Thames groans again, louder than before. You press your foot to the ice. It's still holding. But for how much longer? The morning after the proclamation, you don't head straight to the Frost Fair. You take a detour instead, one guided not by hunger or habit, but by a creeping itch beneath the skin. Unease. Something about the fair's brightness last night, the frantic laughter, the tightened shoulders, felt wrong. Like the kindling before a fire dry and ready to catch. So you drift along the south bank where the alleys run narrower and colder, where chimney smoke is a rare luxury and windows are sealed not with glass but with cloth and nails, and there you hear it. Shouting. Two men, red-faced and spitting, wrestling in the snow. One accuses the other of stealing firewood. The other bellows back that he's only taking what was his first. A third man arrives swinging a pan as if it were a mace, and suddenly the fight grows, feet slipping, fists cracking, curses cutting the cold. No one steps in, everyone watches. When it finally ends, one man limps away holding his side. Another is left face down, groaning in the slush. No victor, just noise, just tension cracking through the ice of civility. You move on, unsettled. It isn't just the cold anymore, it's the way it's changing people. Back at the river, things haven't improved. A booth has collapsed, not from weight or weather, but from a quarrel turned violent. The stall selling sweetmeats is now just splinters and frozen jam. A fight over a pot of porridge ended with someone swinging a ladle like a cudgel. You hear the woman who ran it is nursing a broken arm. At the far end, near the old fishmonger's cart, two children wrestle over a half-eaten loaf. One of them is barefoot. He wins. The other runs off, wailing. No one stops him. You duck into the ale tent again, searching for warmth. Inside, the mood is different. No longer boisterous, brittle. A few men hunch over their drinks, eyes darting. Two sailors are playing dice, loudly accusing each other of cheating. A thin man with a bleeding nose stands by the fire pit, holding his side. You recognize him. He was laughing last night, singing with a mug raised high. Today, his lip is split and his coat is gone. "Where's your coat?" you ask. He doesn't meet your eyes. "Swapped it for broth," he mutters. You sit beside him. The fire burns low. No one bothers to feed it anymore. Fuel is too precious. Even splinters are currency. Outside, the snow picks up again. Fat, slow flakes drifting like feathers from a broken pillow. They look soft, but you know better. There's no softness left. A man bursts into the tent, panting, eyes wide. "They're lighting fires out near the barrels," he gasps. "No pit, just flames on the open ice." Someone swears. Another bolts upright. The thin man beside you groans. "Fools, one crack and we all go down." You follow the rush outside. Near the fair's edge, 3 small fires blaze, their orange glow flickering hungrily against the dusk. They've been lit directly on the surface. No stones, no bricks, just heat against river. A crowd has gathered, some cheering, some shouting warnings. You see the cause, a man with soot on his cheeks and a broken look in his eyes, tossing chair legs and rags into the flames. "They took my stall," he growls. "Let the Queen's Guard sell icicles now." Another man joins him, drops in a stool, then a third. You step back. The ice is no longer groaning, it's screaming. You take another step back, the sound of cracking ice slicing through the night like a whip. It echoes, low, long, and far too familiar now. One of the fires flutters as if startled, its flame shrinking briefly before surging again. Someone shouts, "Get off the river!" Another cries, "Don't run! Don't run!" But fear makes fools of people. Half the crowd bolts toward the embankment, boots slipping, arms flailing. A girl falls hard. Her basket skitters across the ice. scattering shriveled apples and dry crusts. She screams, not from pain, but panic. You grab her arm, haul her upright. She's sobbing, breath puffing from her in ragged clouds. "Is it breaking?" she gasps. You don't answer. You don't know. The fires are still burning. The man who started them stands nearby, staring into the flames, unmoving. His face glows gold in the light. There's something vacant in his eyes. Not madness, but resignation. As if he always knew it would come to this. He doesn't even flinch when two men wrestle him to the ground and begin dousing the fires with snow-packed cloaks. Steam billows, hissing, rising in sheets that briefly blind you. Then silence again. The ice holds. Barely. For now. You return to the centre of the fair like someone coming home from war. The booths are quiet. Many are already empty, shutters closed, tables stripped, prints and charms blowing loose across the river like dry leaves. The puppet theatre is gone. Just the bare boards remain, lashed with ice. Inside the ale tent, people speak in low voices, not out of respect, but fear. A man sits alone, drinking from a frozen mug. His hand sticks to the handle. He doesn't seem to care. In the far corner, someone is praying. You recognize the words. Deliver us from evil. Deliver us from flood. Deliver us from fire. Deliver us from frost. It's not scripture. It's invention. People have begun to make up new prayers. You leave quietly. Back on the embankment, the Queen's banners still flap above the proclamation. They look absurd now, hollow, a warning after the storm has already begun. You walk the shoreline, passing booths you know by scent and sound. The chestnut seller with his burnt pan, the woman who sold wax figures, the eel juggler. Gone. All gone. Only footprints remain, dozens, hundreds, pressed into the frost like ghost signatures. Then you hear shouting again, not rage this time, but argument. You follow it past the edge of the fair toward the rows of tethered carts and crates near the south bank where merchants kept their stock for restocking booths. Two men stand nose to nose. One accuses the other of theft. Barrels of grain, gone during the fire panic. The accused says nothing, just lifts his arms to show he has nothing on him. But behind them, you see it. A small group, 3 or 4, hauling crates onto a sleigh. Fast, focused. They don't wear merchant cloaks. These aren't traders, they're thieves. The shouting men don't even notice. The fair's falling apart too quickly. People are turning their eyes inward, guarding what's theirs. You step away, heart thudding. By the time you reach your lodging house, the wind has risen again. The frost has crept over the window entirely. Inside, your breath fogs as soon as you shut the door. You press your hand to the frost-covered glass and whisper to no one. It's starting to break. And you know, deep down, it's not just the river. By the time the sun rises again, if you can even call that dull smear of light sunrise, the frost fair is a shadow of itself. Not gone, not yet, but cracked, wilted. The colours faded from the banners, the laughter has thinned to a nervous murmur, and the stalls that remain are manned by people who no longer try to smile. The Queen's deadline looms. Tomorrow they'll come to enforce it. But that's not what draws your attention as you step out into the pale light of morning. It's the silence, not the hush of early hours or the quiet of snow. No, it's the absence of something, a person. You glance down the lane. The boy who slept near your doorstep is gone. The one with the hollow cheeks and the coat made of patched sacks. He hasn't stirred all morning. You ask the neighbours. One shrugs. Another mutters that he probably wandered off in the night, or was taken. Taken by what, no one says. You check the alley. He's still there, only not moving. Curled up against the wall, arms crossed tight over his ribs, Fingers clawed like he tried to hold on to something right before the end. There's frost clinging to his eyelashes. His breath never came back. You kneel beside him. You don't cry. You're not even sure you can. But you close his eyes gently, using the edge of your sleeve. It's the least you can do. You glance around. No one's watching, but no one helps either. It's not the first body left in the cold, and it won't be the last. By midday, the talk in the fair has shifted. Not about food, not even about the Queen's order. It's about fingers, hands. Someone whispers that a boy in Lambeth lost 2 toes yesterday. His boots were too thin. Another man claims he saw a beggar near Bishopsgate peeling off his own glove and leaving skin behind. Everyone begins checking their own extremities in secret. You see people clenching and unclenching their hands just to feel them. The old woman who sells boiled water with herbs has changed her pitch. Keep your hands, keep your ears. Hot rosemary tea, prevent the rot. You buy some, even though it's just warm water with something green floating in it. You press the cup between your palms for as long as it takes the warmth to fade. Back on the river, a small crowd has gathered near the centre. At first, you think it's another puppet show or a preacher, but as you approach, you see the circle is silent, still. Everyone watching something on the ice. You push through. It's a boy, barely older than 10. His fingers are black, not purple, not blue, black. He sits silently, staring at them. He doesn't cry. He doesn't even blink. His hands rest on his knees like they no longer belong to him. Beside him, a man squats with a bundle of rags and whispers, "We'll get the surgeon. It's not too late." But his voice is shaking, and you know, even without hearing the rest, that it is too late. Someone hands the boy a boiled onion. He doesn't reach for it. The circle slowly disperses. You walk back to the edge of the river, legs heavy, throat dry. The sky is pale. The light has turned metallic. You press your hands together, hard, and feel nothing. You're scared. But it's a slow fear. Not the kind that makes you scream. It's the kind that settles, like frost on flesh. That evening, back at the lodging house, no one speaks. The hearth remains cold. There's nothing left to burn. The man who used to hum when he carved spoons now just sits in silence, his tools untouched in his lap. Someone tried to light a candle earlier, but the wick snapped in 2, frozen stiff. Now the only glow comes from a stub of tallow cupped in a saucer. It smells faintly of grease and despair. You're wrapped in every layer you own, but the cold still finds a way in. It always does. Not like a blast or a bite, but like water, creeping, pooling in the corners of your bones. Even the blankets feel colder than the air. From upstairs, someone coughs, a raw, rasping sound that ends in silence. You look up, but no one moves to check. The room has entered that bleak state where the boundary between sickness and sleep is too thin to disturb. Outside, you hear footsteps crunching in the snow, then dragging, then nothing. You rise slowly and step to the door. The handle is ice. You have to lift your scarf to protect your hand. You peer out into the alley. There's a man there, slumped against the wall, legs stretched out like he sat down just for a moment and forgot to stand again. His head is tilted back, his eyes closed. You don't recognize him, but someone's laid a cloth over his chest. A mercy or a mark, it's hard to say. That's the second body today. You close the door quietly. Later, someone finally speaks. The older woman with the cracked glasses and fingerless gloves. "The bells didn't ring again," she says. No one answers, because it's true. The great bronze bells of St. Paul's have been silent for days now, not by order of the Queen or the Council, simply because the ropes are frozen, the iron itself too brittle to risk striking. No bell for the dead, no bell for the hour, no bell to remind anyone that time is still passing. You sip the last of your onion water, now cold, and try to remember what warmth used to feel like. Not just in your hands, but in your voice, your chest, your thoughts. You think of spring and can't recall the smell of soil. Someone beside you mutters, "They'll start digging again soon." "What?" another voice asks. "For the burials, when the ground softens." A grim pause, and then, "If it softens." You lie down with your back to the fireless hearth, your face to the wall. The frost has etched strange patterns there, lines and curves like veins in marble. You trace one with your eyes until your vision blurs. You think of the boy with black fingers, the man with no coat, the girl who didn't get up in time. You think of the warmth traded for food, the food traded for heat, and how quickly everything human becomes currency when the frost gets deep enough. And through it all, you think of the ice beneath the fair, still solid, still holding, but with each day, each fire, each crack, closer to surrender. As you drift off, your final thought is not of tomorrow. It's a question. How many will we lose before the thaw? The thaw hasn't come. But something else has. You wake to shouting, not the angry kind, nor the jubilant. Urgent. Men's voices sharp and clipped, boots pounding against packed snow, orders barked in low, practiced tones. Not the rhythm of a riot, the rhythm of soldiers. You throw on your coat and stumble outside, blinking into the dull morning. The sky is heavy with low clouds, and there, lining the embankment in formation, are the Queen's men. Armed, cloaked in dark wool trimmed with frost. Helmets dusted in snow. Halberds slung over shoulders like they mean it. They've come early. The order said 3 days, but the Crown must have reconsidered. You follow the crowd gathering at the river's edge. Tension hums in the air like a taut wire. Someone mutters, "They're here to break the stalls." Someone else, "They'll trample the booths and throw the merchants in jail." You spot one of the guards nailing a second parchment to the wooden post beside the Queen's crest. It reads, "All unauthorised trade upon the Thames is now forbidden. Dismantle or be removed. No deadline, no grace, just now." The frost fair is officially over, but no one moves. Stallholders stare down at their worn crates, their pots, their pans, their barrels, their bread and trinkets and memories. A puppet master hugs a bundle of cloth to his chest, his marionettes, and refuses to blink. The guards begin walking, not fast, not with malice, but with intention. You expect resistance. Instead, what you see is something worse: resignation. A man takes down his banner. A girl kicks over her own crate before the soldiers reach her. Someone tosses a sheaf of broadsides into the air like snowflakes, the printed pages fluttering across the ice. One catches your shoulder. It reads, "This man hath danced on ye Thames." You crumple it in your fist. One by one the booths vanish. Some are dragged away, others broken down and stacked. A few are simply abandoned, their owners walking off without a word. The guards don't strike anyone, but they don't help either. They watch, and where resistance flickers they step forward, not violent, but present. Near the centre of the river a tent collapses with a groan, its poles too brittle from days in the frost. A boy tries to salvage the brazier inside. A guard kicks snow over the embers. The man who juggled frozen eels is gone. The charm seller's red pages lie scattered in a snowdrift. Even the woman who sold Queen's milk has vanished, her cauldron tipped sideways, its last burned ring of snow still steaming. You move through the remains like a ghost in a house that used to laugh. The joy has drained. The absurdity, the warmth, the reckless hope, all packed up or trampled flat. What's left now are crates and footprints, splinters and silence. Then you see something that stops you cold. Near the old puppet stage, a merchant is refusing to move. He stands tall, too tall considering his legs tremble beneath him, and spreads his arms wide in front of his barrel of salted fish. A guard approaches, says something you can't hear. The man says nothing. He reaches into the barrel, lifts a fish in each hand and raises them like sceptres. Then he starts to sing. A lullaby, soft and strange. The tune warbled and cracked. The guard stands still, and for a moment no one moves. Then another guard steps forward. You turn away before the singing stops. You don't know how it ends. Maybe the man is dragged away, fish still in hand. Maybe the guards let him finish his song. Maybe the ice finally opens beneath his boots and swallows him whole, taking the salted fish and the lullaby with it. But you don't stay to find out. You walk. Not toward the riverbank this time, but inland, away from the water's edge, down alleys lined with shuttered windows and boots strung over chimneys to dry, still frozen stiff in place. The city behind the fair is no warmer. The frost has sunk into every inch of it, and today something else is visible. It's not that the poor are suffering. That's old news. But today, for the first time, the rich are suffering visibly too. You pass a grand carriage stalled at the corner of Cornhill, the horses shivering, nostrils thick with frost. A footman shouts and smacks the reins, but they won't budge. The wheels are stuck, frozen into a rut of slush and waste. The carriage door opens, and out steps a gentleman wrapped in more fur than man. His boots are lined with silver buckles. His gloves look new. He looks furious. He turns and snaps at the footman. Push it, or find someone who will. But no one helps. Not because they don't want to, because no one can. No one has the strength. A beggar across the street leans against a wall, coughing, too tired even to stretch out his hand. Beside him, a noblewoman in a fox-trimmed cloak stares blankly at the carriage, her cheeks sunken, her fingers bare. She has no gloves. You watch them, rich and poor, locked in the same helpless tableau, all their gold and lace useless in this deep freeze. It's a strange thing, seeing people equalized by need, not in a glorious revolution, not in some noble uprising, but in frostbite and silence, in food lines and smokeless chimneys. Later, you pass a bakery with no queue, not because it's closed, but because its windows are empty. A child stands outside anyway, hands tucked into armpits, just looking at the shelves. At St. Mary Woolnoth, a line has formed, but not for church. It winds toward the side of the building, where barrels of broth are being doled out by men in thick cloaks with civic badges pinned to their collars. Poor relief. You join the end of the line. Ahead of you, two children argue in whispers about whether dead men can feel cold. One says yes, the other no. Their mother hushes them with a hand on both shoulders, not unkindly, just distant. When you reach the front, the man ladling broth doesn't look at you, just tilts the pot and fills your cracked cup with a thin grey stew that smells faintly of barley and boiled bone. You thank him. He doesn't answer. That afternoon you sit on the steps of a dry fountain in the square, sipping your broth and watching the street, and you realise there are no more beggars, not because they've been lifted up, but because everyone is now begging. For warmth, for food, for wood, for mercy. Titles mean less each day. A lord without coals is just a man with cold feet. A servant without soup is no one's servant at all. The frost has made London a ledger of needs, and everyone is listed now. You sip slowly, and wonder if the river will be next, not to freeze, but to take. You head back toward the frost fair at dusk, though it's hardly recognisable anymore. The colours are gone. The banners hang limp, heavy with ice. Where there were once laughing children and puppet shows, now there are huddled clusters of men whispering in corners, and women wrapping layers tighter around their waists, sleeves pulled past their fingers. But one thing hasn't faded, the endless human urge to do something. And in this weather, that something is often remedy. You notice it as you pass a booth that's somehow still standing, patched canvas walls, a crude symbol drawn in soot on the flap, an eye inside a circle. A woman calls out from inside, hot draft for frozen breath, powdered ivy for bone chill, come in, come in. You hesitate, and then you enter. Inside it's warmer, barely. The air smells of rosemary, ash, and old root vegetables. Bundles of herbs hang from string. Bowls of coloured powders line a rickety shelf, each labelled in crooked script. Nettle dust, dried marrow scrap, crushed oak bark. The woman behind the table could be 40, could be 70. Her eyes are sharp and clear, though, and her hands never stop moving, grinding, mixing, folding pouches. You look brittle, she says without looking up. You need heat, inside-out heat. I don't have coin, you say automatically. Then don't pay with coin. She points at a corner of the tent. Trade me a story. You blink. A story? She shrugs. Something true? Something I haven't heard? You think for a moment, then tell her about the boy with black fingers, about the fish merchant singing as the fair was torn down, about the silence of the bells at St. Paul's. She listens, doesn't smile, just nods once and hands you a pouch of something soft and sweet-smelling. Steep it, she says, not in boiling water, let it breathe. You thank her, step back into the cold, and feel something you haven't felt in days. Curiosity. Further down the river, there are more stalls like hers. Makeshift apothecaries offering jars of dark honey said to guard against frostbite, or bone marrow pastes wrapped in linen for soaking joints. One man sells heated stones sealed in sewn leather pouches. Place 'em in your boots, keep your toes till spring. Even the charm sellers are back, but now their ware's a stranger. One offers snail shells wrapped in red string. Protection from lung freeze, he claims. Another sells tiny mirrors painted black, to reflect the frost back into the sky. You ask him what that means. He says nothing, only taps his temple twice. At a corner stall, a woman lays out lumps of brown paste and claims it's made from rat marrow and molasses. Good for the blood. You pass on that one. But the most crowded booth of all isn't selling anything you can touch. It's a man standing atop a box wrapped in robes that brush the ice, reading from a battered book. His voice carries in the air like a slow bell. Cold is not death, he says. Cold is a lesson. You stop to listen. The warmth we kept from others now keeps from us. The light we hoarded now hides its face. The river was not made for joy, but for reckoning. People murmur, some agree, some spit, but they listen. And you realise that in this new frostbitten city, people aren't just trading goods anymore. They're trading beliefs. Because when the fire dies and the food spoils and the Queen's banners freeze in place, what else is left? The man's voice rings on, slow and solemn. When the river freezes, the heart must thaw. When the sky offers no sun, we must offer light to each other. A few people nod. One woman bows her head and begins to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just soft tears falling silently and steaming where they hit her scarf. You stay until he closes his book and steps down. No one claps, no one speaks. He simply walks away into the gathering dusk, his footsteps vanishing almost instantly into the powdered snow. And then the crowd begins to shift again, not toward the warmth, because there is none, toward meaning. Back on the bank you see a new group forming. They're not selling, they're writing, on sheets of bark, scraps of linen, even carved into boards. Each person holds a quill or stick of charcoal, scratching words with red noses and frozen fingers. You step closer and realise what they're doing. They're writing remedies. Not ones for the body, but for the mind, the soul, the spirit, if you like. One reads, "For nights when fingers burn with cold, sleep beside another, back to back, not face to face. The breath escapes, the heat remains." Another, "To fight hopelessness, move. 10 steps north, 10 steps south. Repeat. The cold hates rhythm." One simply says, "Make soup, share soup." You smile in spite of yourself. People are pinning these messages to a wooden board hammered into the riverbank. A new kind of altar. No priests, no guards, just nails, parchment, and need. You read them until your fingers ache. Then someone begins singing. A low, familiar tune, London's Burning, but slowed down, stretched into something sorrowful and almost reverent. Others join in, not as a choir, but as murmurs. The verses tumble over one another like breath on a window pane. You hear a man singing behind you with a voice that cracks on the high notes. You don't turn, you just close your eyes and sing too. Because in the absence of firewood and full bellies and bells, this is the warmth you're left with. A song, a scrap of cloth with scrawled advice, the shape of someone standing near enough to be felt but not touched. Later that evening, as you wander back through what remains of the fair, you spot a figure hunched at the edge of the river, scribbling something into the frost with a stick. You lean over and read the words before they fade. The cold takes what it can, but we choose what it leaves behind. No name, just the message, and by morning the frost will claim even that. But for tonight, you carry it with you. You walk the slow path home beneath a sky that no longer even pretends to shine. The stars are gone. The moon hides behind gauze. But as you climb the steps to your door, you find something waiting. A cup of broth. Still warm. No note, no explanation. Just a gift. You drink it slowly, hands wrapped around the warmth, chest full of something you almost recognize. Not joy, not safety, but resistance. And in a winter like this, that might be the most powerful remedy of all. By the time you return to the docks, even the ships seem to have given up. They sit frozen in place, their hulls crusted with frost, sails half lowered and stiff as boards. Ropes hang in arcs like icicles, and barrels on deck bulge from ice pressure, some cracked open with their contents frozen mid-spill. Molasses, salted meat, lamp oil, all turned solid as stone. The sailors are gone. Most have taken refuge inland. Those who remain move slowly, wrapped in layers of sailcloth and wool, faces hidden behind scarves stiff with frost. They don't shout across decks anymore. They signal with nods, silent, like ghosts walking the bones of their own ships. You watch one man try to pry open a hatch with a crowbar. It splinters. He tosses it overboard, except there's no water to catch it, only ice. It clatters and rolls, the sound echoing strangely through the frozen harbour. At the base of a mooring post, someone's written in charcoal. No tide, no time. You walk the shoreline for a while. The frost is thicker here, crusted with dirt and crushed fish bones. Crates sit unopened, branded with names of ports you've never seen. Lisbon, Calais, Flanders, now just black letters on frozen wood. You pass a boy hacking at a salted cod with a hammer. The fish chips like slate. He doesn't look up. At a warehouse entrance, 2 guards from the Merchants' Guild warm their hands over a pan of coal. One nods to you. "No more shipments in," he says flatly, "and none going out." "What happens to the goods?" you ask. He shrugs. "Spoil, freeze, rot. Depends on your luck." Behind him, you glimpse rows of barrels stacked ceiling high, all rimmed with frost. Some have burst. One leaks frozen honey and brittle yellow curls. The cold isn't just choking the fair, it's choking commerce. And in a city built on trade, that's a deeper threat than hunger. Down the quay, a man stands beside a wagon piled high with textiles, bolts of cloth now stiff with ice. He's yelling at no one in particular. These were for the Queen's tailor. These were destined for court. His voice rises, panicked. If they won't thaw, I'm ruined. No one answers, because everyone here is ruined. You round the corner into the customs yard and find a gathering. Half a dozen traders, clerks and bookkeepers huddled around a small fire. A parchment rests on a barrel between them, ink beginning to bleed from the cold. They're arguing in hushed voices. She won't pay. Then you'll write her. She's in Kent. Then walk to Kent. You recognise one man. He sold oranges last spring, had a stall with bright ribbons and a song for every customer. Now he's pale, beardless, hands bandaged. He doesn't speak. Another man stares at a ledger in his lap, lips moving soundlessly. He's been reciting losses for an hour, someone whispers. You don't interrupt. You just sit on a crate nearby, hands tucked under your arms, and listen as numbers fade into fog. You think of the Frost Fair, of the laughter, the swan, the printing press, the boy who sang on fish barrels. You think of the Queen's Guards, the Red Proclamation, the burning chairs, the boy with black fingers, and now, here, you see the final consequence. Silence in the counting houses, because money means nothing when the ships don't move, when the fish won't thaw, when the ink freezes in the quill. No trade, no market, no movement, only cold, only stillness, only the weight of everything stopped. You stay at the docks longer than you intended, lulled by the strange rhythm of this frozen stillness. No haggling, no barking orders, no clatter of barrels, just the occasional crack of ice, like the city exhaling in its sleep. Eventually you rise and make your way along the edge of the river toward the lower wharf, where the smaller boats used to unload grain and dried fruit. There too everything has stopped. Ships rest like stranded whales, their bellies frozen into the river, sails limp and furled like folded wings. One has sunk slightly, the bow dipping under the weight of snow and neglect. Only the stern sticks up, its name barely visible beneath a glaze of ice, St. Fortune. You snort quietly. The irony bites harder than the wind. Near the hull, two dockhands sit in the shadow of a splintered mast, playing at dice with broken buttons. One of them eyes you and nods toward a nearby stack of crates. You look hungry. You do. You climb up and sit, sharing what little warmth proximity allows. One of them pulls a biscuit from his coat and breaks it in half. It's hard as stone. You suck on it anyway. The man with the buttons gestures to the ice. She's not holding, he says. Not like before. You can feel it. Hollow underneath. His friend nods. Saw a cart go through this morning near King's Steps. Didn't sink fast, just crumbled beneath it. Like the river decided it had had enough. You don't respond. You can feel it too. Later, at the edge of the fish market, now just an open patch of stained snow, you hear shouting. Not angry this time. Desperate. You follow it to a storehouse where merchants once kept salted goods. A crowd has gathered, shoving toward the doorway. Inside, you catch glimpses of barrels, crates, food, preserved pears, salted pork, butter. A man tries to block the entrance. This is spoken for, he insists. Bound for Bristol. No one's going to Bristol, someone roars. A barrel top splinters. They push past him. You don't join the rush. You just watch as they strip the shells bare. Not violently, but hungrily, like rats in a barnstorm. No one fights, not yet. But you can feel how thin the line is, how easily need can slip into chaos. By the time the soldiers arrive, the storehouse is empty. One guard mutters that the magistrates are meeting again tonight, trying to decide whether to open the royal granaries. Another says the Queen's. Council is split. Some want to wait. Some say it's already too late. You don't linger. Back on the river, fewer stalls remain. Most have folded. A handful still cling to life, selling broth, hot bricks, melted tallow to rub into aching joints. But the crowds have changed. No longer curious, no longer festive. They're quiet, watchful. And then you hear something new, the creak of cartwheels. You turn. A horse-drawn wagon crests the embankment, flanked by 2 guards. It's not carrying flour or fish or firewood, it's carrying coffins. The lid of one has cracked from the cold. You glimpse linen, straw. They stop in the centre of what was once the frost fair. The guards speak to no one. The driver steps down, lights a lantern, and begins to mark the snow with chalk. A long rectangle, then another. Graves, on the river. There's no other place to dig. And as the chalk dust drifts into the wind, you understand just how far things have fallen. This isn't a fair anymore. It's a funeral that hasn't finished yet. You don't return home that night. You stay on the embankment long after the cart of coffins has rolled away, its lantern bobbing like a slow heartbeat as it disappears into the snow. Something in you refuses to go back, to the silence of your room, to the breathless bodies curled like roots around the fireless hearth. Instead you walk. You follow the Thames eastward, past where the frost fair once pulsed, past the last ragged stalls and the refuse of a celebration gone brittle. The further you go, the fewer people you see. The buildings thin, the alleys darken, and the wind gets louder, no longer blocked by tents and laughter and boiling pots. Here, the cold feels different, not harder, older. You come upon an alley you don't recognise. That's saying something. You've lived your whole life within a mile of the river, and yet this place feels unfamiliar. Narrow, walled high with crumbling brick, the frost so thick it glows faintly in the dark like moss in a cave. A small door opens, you jump. But the figure who emerges is no threat, just a man in scholar's robes, layered beneath a patched coat. He carries a small oil lamp, and his face is thin, drawn, more shadow than skin. He doesn't see you. You follow him. Why? You don't know. Maybe because he walks like he knows where he's going, or because the alley around you hums with something. Urgency, perhaps, or old knowledge. He slips through another door, leaving it ajar. You approach. Inside is not what you expect. It's a counting house. Or was. The walls are lined with shelves of parchment and bound ledgers, all rimmed with frost. The ink on some has cracked. Quills sit frozen in inkwells. Candles burnt down to their wicks and then left to freeze in puddles of wax. And yet, the room is full. Men and women sit at long tables in heavy coats, scribbling with charcoal onto fresh parchment. You hear only the soft drag of writing. No one speaks. You stand in the doorway until the scholar turns. "Lost something?" he asks gently. You nod. Warmth, sanity, a bit of both. He gestures to the room. "This is what remains." Of what? Commerce, he says. Belief, a record of what we were before the ice, and perhaps who we become after. You frown. He walks to one of the shelves, retrieves a stack of parchment and lays it before you. Columns, names, weights, measurements. "It's all going," he says. "Shipments, debts, grain tallies. Frozen ink can't be reclaimed. Ledgers warped by damp won't read. The city's memory is melting even while the frost deepens." You run a hand over the brittle parchment. The letters flake under your touch. He lowers his voice. "We used to measure time in coin. Now we measure it in losses. Every hour another crate spoiled, another merchant vanished, another oath broken." You glance around. The others, scribes, apprentices, perhaps even lords fallen from grace, keep writing. What are they recording? You whisper. "The truth," he says, as it vanishes. You sit. He offers you a quill, but it snaps in your fingers. He replaces it with a piece of charcoal. You don't know what to write, but you begin anyway. Not a ledger, not a transaction, a memory of a river turned to glass, of a swan roast steaming on ice, of a boy singing with blackened fingers, of charms made of red paper, of warmth shared like bread, of silence. You write until your fingers ache. When you leave, it's nearly morning. Outside, the sky's beginning to lighten, not with colour, but with that pale, dusty grey that means morning is arriving whether you're ready or not. The frost glows faintly on the cobblestones, and your breath comes in tired puffs. You've been awake all night, but you don't feel it. Something about writing in that freezing room, scribbling down what little you could salvage from memory, made the hours pass without hunger, without pain. You walk slowly now. The streets are emptier than usual, even for this hour. A few carts creak by, loaded not with food or goods, but with furniture, chairs, bed frames, shelving, all bound for burning. You pass a man selling chunks of a dismantled wardrobe, his hands blackened with soot and sap. Maple burns hot, he says, not for long, but hot. You nod, but keep walking. Farther down the lane, a woman sits by a wall with a basket in her lap. She's threading something, red thread through a stack of little cloth squares. You recognise the pattern, charms, protection spells. They're smaller now, more hurried. She offers one without a word. You hand over a sliver of bread, almost instinctively. She takes it, bites off a corner, and nods. No one talks much anymore. Conversation costs heat. You cross back toward the river, and as you near the edge of the old fairground, you're met with a shock. The centre of the Thames, where the heart of the Frost Fair had once pulsed with song and cider and madness, has been cleared, not by time or wind, by order. A cordon of soldiers lines the banks. The ice in the centre has been cut, sawed, shattered and removed in jagged blocks. An open patch of water now glimmers dully, steam curling from its surface like breath rising from a wound. The smell hits you first. Salted wood, soot, charcoal, ash. Then you see what it is. A mass pyre built on planks laid carefully across the ice. Bodies, wrapped in cloth, bundled in straw, stacked neatly, too neatly, awaiting the torch. You step closer and see that each one has been marked with a piece of red paper, like the charms, except these are blank, just a red square pinned to each chest. A soldier lights the edge. The fire catches fast. Dry wood soaked in lamp oil, rags stuffed into the crevices. The flames leap, high and gold, and for the first time in days the air feels hot. People watch from the embankment in silence. No mourning, no wails, just eyes fixed forward, blinking against the wind and smoke. You look beside you and find the old scholar from the counting house, his gloved hands clasped tightly. Frost is slow, he says, not looking at you, but rot is faster. What happened? He exhales. No more ground to dig, and too many to bury. You watch as the fire crackles. One of the bodies shifts, sinking slightly, limbs contracting in the heat. The crowd doesn't flinch. They've already flinched too many times. A woman begins to hum softly, a tune you don't recognise. Others join her, not singing, just humming. A low, reverent sound, like mourning from the throat, not the tongue. And in that moment, the fire becomes something else. Not just destruction, not just utility, but memory, burning in real time. You close your eyes, and when you open them, a thin snow has started to fall. No one moves. They let the snow land on their shoulders, their hoods, their hands, melting, hissing, vanishing as it touches the flames. You stay long after the last of the fire dies down, long after the crowd thins and the guards begin scraping what's left of the ash into sacks. No one tells you to leave. No one speaks at all. There's something sacred about silence now. You've begun to understand that. The smoke has settled low across the river like a second skin, and for the first time you can see the damage the ice has taken. What used to be smooth, glassy, glimmering, now buckles in places, bruised with dark seams, discoloured where the heat from the pyres warped the thickness. It doesn't creak anymore. It sags. You head east, walking parallel with the river. The wind whips harder now, angrier somehow. The kind that doesn't just sting, it tests you, presses against your chest to see how much you can take. You grit your teeth and lean into it. The city looks smaller now, not in size, but in certainty. Chimneys once puffed proudly along rooftops now sit quiet, capped with ice. Market signs hang crooked. Icicles hang from boot soles strung over windows like drying fish. It all seems tired, shrinking in on itself. And then you hear it. A crack, not a groan. Not the distant pop of freezing timber. A true, clean crack. It rolls through the alley like a drumbeat. You stop cold. People begin to emerge from doorways, just a few, eyes wide, heads tilted. No one speaks. Then another, closer, sharper. Someone shouts from the direction of the river. You can't make out the words, just the tone. Urgent, final. You run. By the time you reach the edge of the bank, others have already gathered, their faces pale. Some are pointing, some are backing away. Out on the Thames, the ice has begun to move. At first it's subtle, a faint shifting like fabric stretching. But then, with terrifying grace, a line appears, a long, jagged seam running from the far bank all the way across to the wharf. It doesn't make a sound. It just appears, clean, black, wet. And then comes the third sound. Not a crack, a collapse. A section of the river, wide as a street and twice as long, simply drops. Gone. Vanished. Water rushes up in its place like breath returning to lungs after a long-held gasp. The frozen Thames has broken open, and it's not stopping. People scream now. Some run toward the edge. Some flee from it. You see a child clutching a bundle of rags, crying beside an overturned crate. You scoop him up without thinking, run him up the steps to the nearest doorway. Someone opens it without question. You turn back. The ice is fracturing fast now, splitting in all directions. Not just one sheet shattering, but many, all at once. Like the river has remembered what it is, and is taking revenge for the weeks spent pretending. The last of the booths go under. The ale tent collapses like a punctured lung. You catch sight of the painter's stage, where sketches of the frost fair once hung like trophies, topple and vanish into churning water. The marionette stage folds in on itself. The puppet master is nowhere to be seen. People shout names, some throw ropes, others watch helplessly knowing it's too late. You see one man try to leap from one cracking sheet to another and fall between them like a coin slipping between cracks. Then suddenly, quiet. Not peace, just the terrible, rushing stillness of something that can no longer be undone. The sound of the ice breaking fades, but the echoes remain. Bouncing off the buildings, rattling inside your ribs, you stand there, breath fogging in short bursts, your chest aching not from exertion, but from the shock of stillness after motion. The Thames is no longer a river of glass. It's a graveyard of splinters. All around you, people stare, dazed and quiet. Some are crying, others just watch, eyes wide, mouths half open, the kind of expressions you only see after lightning strikes too close. You move slowly now, back toward the river's edge. The guards have arrived, but they're not shouting anymore. They've stopped trying to herd or command. One of them stands on the embankment with his helmet tucked under his arm, staring at the water like he's trying to remember what it's supposed to look like. The current is returning. You can see it, slow, heavy, like the river is stretching after a long unnatural sleep. Chunks of broken ice float downstream. nudging one another gently as if nothing ever happened. But the signs remain. A child's mitten bobbing between slats of wood, a tangle of fabric caught on a broken pole, a red paper charm, sodden now, the ink running like tears, clinging to the side of a half-submerged crate. You step back as a wave of frigid water laps against the stones. It leaves a slick trail of slush and soot. The fire pyres are gone, snuffed out by the flood. Even the chalk outlines that mark the makeshift graves have vanished. Someone beside you whispers, "That was Agnes's tent." You look and realise they're pointing to the spot where the healer's booth once stood. Nothing remains, not the string of herbs, not the soot symbol, not even a scrap of cloth. Gone. Across the water you see a line of carts pulling away, laden with whatever could be saved. Battered crates, broken tools, bundles of cloth wrapped in burlap. The Frost Fair's final survivors. Not performers, not merchants, just people now. People leaving something behind because it left them first. At your feet, a section of river ice rocks gently against the bank, cradling a wooden sign that bobs slowly in the water. You reach down and pull it up. It reads, "Welcome to the river market." You wipe away the ice with your sleeve, but the paint is already fading. You hold it anyway. A souvenir, a relic, a lie. Back at the square near the counting house, people begin to gather again, not to trade, not to sing, not to warm their hands over cracked barrels of fire, but to wait. For what? No one knows. There are no more fairs, no more booths, no proclamations, just silence, and behind it, questions. Will the food come now that the river moves again? Will the frost fade? Will the Queen finally open her stores? Will the bodies keep rising? You clutch the sign tighter. One boy nearby asks his mother, "Can we skate again tomorrow?" She looks down and you see her swallow hard before shaking her head. "The river's gone, love." He nods once, quietly, as if he's not sure whether to be sad or relieved. You look at the water one last time, then you turn from it, not out of fear, but because there's nothing left to see. The fair is over, the frost has cracked, and London, whether it's ready or not, must begin again. You return to the alleys of the South Bank like someone stepping back into an abandoned theatre after the curtain's final drop. Everything feels warped, like a stage set left too long in the rain. You pass the old tavern, its door sagging on one hinge. The sign, the bleeding ram, hangs at a crooked angle. Icicles melting like wax tears from the corners. Inside, it's darker than you remember. Only a single lantern glows near the hearth, which now holds not a fire, but a pile of broken stool legs and one damp log that refuses to catch. A few figures huddle there, faces unfamiliar, strangers, displaced fairgoers perhaps, or locals whose homes are no longer warm enough to matter. One of them looks up as you enter but doesn't speak. You find a corner, sit down slowly and let the weight of the broken river settle into your bones. Everything smells of smoke now. Not wood smoke, the rich, rolling kind that clings to cloaks after a good roast, but the brittle tang of scorched linen and spoiled fat. Even your skin smells like it. Fire, ice, ash. You lean forward, elbows on knees, and stare at the floorboards. Someone pushes a tin cup your way. Warm water, no tea, just heat. You nod your thanks and wrap your fingers around it. Your knuckles are cracked. The skin is rough like fish scales. A man at the bar mutters something about the herring man's boat having gone under with the melt. Someone else answers with a sigh, nothing more. The barmaid, eyes sunken but still alert, is wrapping cloth around a leaking cask. And you realise something. No one is waiting for news anymore. Not the Queen's decrees. Not the heralds on horseback. Not even the church bells. That time is gone. The frost has stripped away ceremony. What's left is endurance. In the corner, a boy, no older than 12, begins reciting something under his breath. At first you think he's praying, but no, it's a market chant, one of the call and response rhymes the vendors used on the ice. Candied plums and sugared pears. Buy 2, I'll throw in apples rare. The rhythm is all wrong now, slowed, like a lullaby. He's not selling anything, just remembering. An old man near him starts to hum along. You recognise him, the marionette master, or what's left of him. His puppets are gone, but he still has the strings. One dangles from his sleeve, knotted around a finger like a forgotten charm. 3 for a penny, 6 for a prayer, come warm your fingers on winter's dare. You close your eyes, not to block it out, but to keep it in. The fare is gone, but its echo lingers, not in banners or roasts or sugar-candied quills, but in voices, scarred, softened, but still alive. The barmaid sets a chipped bowl down near the hearth. Porridge, thin, mostly water, but hot. Someone says, God save the frost, and someone else answers, she's done what kings could not. A laugh rolls out from a shadowed booth, short, sharp, real. You drink your warm water slowly, and in the soft clink of cups, the hush of breath, and the tap of melting drops from the rafters, you hear something that almost sounds like a beginning. Later that day, you wander back out into the streets, now patched with slush and streaks of mud where the frost has given up its grip. The sun tries to break through a smear of cloud, but it's too late in the day to do anything useful. You walk through the remnants of what was once the greatest party the river ever hosted. What remains is hardly worth the name. The place where the bookseller's stall stood, just a muddy rectangle and a half-frozen quill someone dropped. The puppeteer's painted curtain, washed down river. Only the pole remains, snapped in two and stuck in the ice like a crooked tooth. And the place where you wrote, scribbled stories by candlelight to stay warm, to stay sane, is just a damp hollow beneath a collapsed sheet of canvas. No one has cleaned anything up. They don't need to. The river is doing that for them now, slowly, bitterly, with a kind of indifference that feels almost cruel. You're not the only one walking this ruin. Others pick through the remains in silence. One woman tugs at a rope stuck in the ice. It finally gives, revealing a bundle of half-soaked pamphlets tied with twine. She brushes the topmost one off, stares, then drops it without a word. It lands with a wet slap, face up. You wonders of the frost fare, an honest account. You smile, but it doesn't last. Farther up, a man kneels by the river's edge. He's building something. A stack of small stones, each one carefully balanced atop the other. No one asks why. No one needs to. Memorials don't need names anymore. A child wanders up and places a single plum on top of the stones. Not a candied one, a real one, shriveled, frostbitten, but whole. You keep moving. In a narrow alley near the church, you come across a line of people, silent, wrapped in layers, holding small tokens, buttons, coins, a feather. One woman even clutches a bar of soap like it's gold. You join the queue without asking. That's how things are now. You queue first, ask later. The line leads to a ledger on a table, manned by 2 clerks with red noses and black ink stains on their fingers. One takes your name, the other takes your offering. They're counting something. Not wealth, not sins, losses. Booth? The clerk asks. You nod. Writer's stall, South Ice. Destroyed? Yes. Recovered anything? You hold up the wooden sign you took from the river earlier. Welcome to the river market. He squints, then nods. Entry noted. No receipt. No stamp. Just a glance and a dip of the quill. You move on, past a group sewing torn sleeves back onto coats. Past a man teaching children how to salt pork without using brine. Past the old scholar, now surrounded by young ones, showing them how to write on scraps of bark when parchment is gone. The frost may be leaving, but has left behind a blueprint, not of joy, of survival. At nightfall you climb a staircase to the rooftops, where once the chimney sweeps danced in defiance of the cold. From here, the Thames looks almost ordinary again, still dangerous, still cracked, but flowing. And you remember a phrase whispered in the tavern earlier, "She's done what kings could not." The frost came with no permission, and left with no apology. But in doing so, it carved something into the city that won't soon be forgotten, not in stone, not in ink, but in people. You wake before the sun, startled by a cold gust that slips through a crack in the shutters. Dawn hasn't properly broken yet, just a thin silver line behind the rooftops, as if someone's peeled back the sky a little to peek inside. You pull your cloak tight and sit up slowly, your muscles aching from the chill that still clings to every stone in the room. The fire in the grate is just ash now. A few embers glow like dying stars, but they offer no heat. You dress quickly, fingers stiff as you fasten each button. The frost might be melting outside, but inside these walls it still rains. You step outside into a street that looks changed, not cleaner, not brighter, but lighter, as if the air itself is no longer carrying the weight of a frozen river on its back. There's a smell now that wasn't there before. Damp earth, mud, something a little rotten, yes, but also real. Life returning inch by inch. And so begins the thaw, not just in weather, but in everything. You head west, toward the old meat market, passing shop fronts that have reopened their shutters just a crack. People sweep slush from doorsteps. Laundry lines appear again, tentative, strung between chimneys, dripping quietly in the pale morning light. A boy skates briefly down a cobbled lane in his socks, whooping before disappearing into a courtyard. Even the bells ring differently now, less like warnings, more like reminders. The world still turns. At the market square, things are quiet, not empty, just slower. The chaos of the frost fair is over, but not forgotten. You spot a butcher selling squirrel meat from a faded cloth. A fishmonger displays eels on melting snow instead of ice. A baker cuts stale loaves into thin slices and offers them with a smile. Then, by the east wall, you see something strange. A table made of mismatched planks, and on it, the burnt sign of the river market. Someone's propped it up again, this time as a gesture, not an advertisement. Behind it, 2 children sell candles made from the drippings they collected from tents and shrines that once stood on the ice. Fair wax, one of them calls softly, last of the frost. People buy them not for light, but for memory. A man nearby sells tiny sketches, charcoal on cloth. You see one and pause. It's the puppet stage, mid-collapse, the marionette frozen mid-fall. The detail is crude but haunting. He shrugs when you ask the price. "Take it," he says. No one wants to remember, but someone has to. So you take it, and fold it into your coat pocket like a relic. You keep walking. At the edge of the square, a woman plays a fiddle. Not well. The strings are loose, but the tune is familiar. It's the same one the brewer's wife sang back when she danced barefoot on the frozen Thames. Only now, it's slower, minor, less celebration, more farewell. You sit on a barrel and listen, and for the first time in weeks the wind doesn't sting. The music loops and wanders, curling around, the chimneys slipping beneath doors, winding its way across muddy lanes and soot-streaked glass. You close your eyes and let it carry you, not back to the fair, but forward, towards something uncertain, but warm. You linger in the square until the morning light turns gold and the frost glistens less like silver and more like sweat. The city seems to breathe again, not with ease, not yet, but with something like rhythm. Across the way, 2 men begin repairing a cartwheel, grumbling but steady. You watch as one of them pulls out a long-bent nail and flattens it on a stone, too stubborn to throw it away. Nothing is wasted now, not even broken things. You turn toward the river again, out of habit more than hope. The banks are lined with debris. Slush laps gently where thick ice once towered. You can't help but picture it again. The booths, the games, the roast geese turning on their spits. But now, the water is moving. There are no more flags, no more chalk signs. Just the sluggish brown current pushing along what it can carry and leaving behind what it won't. Then something catches your eye. A small raft of bundled sticks drifting close to shore. It looks like trash, until you notice the feathers. Someone's laid them out carefully, tucked in tight. A bundle of tokens, maybe. An offering, or a farewell. You step down to the river's edge. The mud is slick, your boots nearly lose their grip. But you kneel anyway, just for a moment. You reach out and gently steady the raft as it bumps the bank. On top, beneath the feathers, is a scrap of cloth. You lift it. It's torn from a coat, a child's coat, blue, with a brass button still attached. You don't know whose it was, and maybe that's the point. You set it back down, letting the raft drift free. Not everything needs to be claimed. Behind you, the clatter of hooves startles you. A rider passes, his coat marked with the Queen's insignia. A courier, the first you've seen in days. You watch as he stops near the church and delivers a scroll to a gathering of townsfolk. No trumpets, no declarations, just quiet nods. The message is passed from hand to hand. Relief measures in motion. The Queen has ordered supplies to resume from inland granaries. Extra firewood will be distributed first to households with children and the elderly. The frost is declared waning. There's no cheer, just a few sighs, a few clasped hands. You find yourself smiling, not from joy but from release. You stand and begin walking, not toward home, but wherever your legs take you. Past houses whose chimneys now puff again, past shutters being unbarred, past a group of children drawing in the thawed dirt with sticks. One of them has etched a picture of the frost fair. Tents, musicians, a clumsy attempt at a frozen river. Another adds a giant goose on a spit, comically large, its legs too thick for its body. They giggle. You crouch beside them, and they pause to let you admire their work. It was real. Right? One girl asks, suddenly serious. The ice fair? You nod. It was. I was there. She beams. My uncle says it was made up. You point at the crooked goose. That part might be. Laughter again. A lightness that wasn't there yesterday. You leave them drawing their legends in the mud, and as you walk away you realise the frost is fading, but the stories? They've only just begun. The sun has found its way back into the city, not with warmth exactly, but with presence. It slips through chimney smoke and lights up the puddles where frost once ruled. As you move through the narrower lanes behind the old Guildhall, you find yourself noticing things again. Small things. A cat curled in a patch of sunlight on a windowsill. A woman retying her bonnet ribbon with care. The sound of someone hammering a loose board back into place. It's not just survival anymore, it's recovery. You pass by a workshop that had been shuttered since midwinter. Now the door is open, and a man stands outside brushing soot off a wooden sign. Fariner and Sons, binders of fine books. You pause. He catches your eye and shrugs. The glue's gone stiff, but we'll coax her back to life, he says. Then he adds, almost as an afterthought, we still have paper. That alone feels like a miracle. Down the lane, the printer who once sold Frost Fair pamphlets has started a new batch. His hands are still stained black. You recognise the man beside him, the same one who'd carved rude woodcuts of dancing pigs on ice. They're working together now. Same tools, different stories. This one is titled A Month of Ice, Recollections from the River. You ask for a copy. The printer hesitates, then pulls one from a wrapped bundle, still warm from the press. You hold it like a rare fruit. It smells of ink, damp wool and rebirth. Back in the square, someone's hoisting a small stage from a wagon. You blink. A puppet show. Already? The marionette master, yes, the same one with the string still wound round his wrist, has returned. This time, no fancy backdrops. Just a plank and a painted curtain nailed to a barrel. A small crowd gathers. Mostly children, but a few familiar faces too. You find a place near the back and fold your arms to keep warm, though the wind has gentled. The show begins. It's not about kings, not about battles. It's about a mouse who built a shop on the river, sold jam pies to hedgehogs, and skated all the way to the Queen's palace. The plot makes no sense. The voices squeak and warble, but everyone is rapt. When the mouse falls through a crack in the ice and floats away on a teacup lid, the children gasp. You laugh before you realise you're doing it. So do others. It's not just distraction. It's a kind of collective exhale. Afterwards, the puppeteer bows and someone presses a copper coin into his hand. He bows again. A second time, not for the applause, but for the moment. That's what the city has become now, a series of small, brave moments. You stop by a fence post where someone's posted a charcoal sketch of the river mid-freeze. Scrawled beneath in crooked script are the words, "We froze, we feasted, we forgave. Thames, 1608. You stare at it a long while. Then you take a piece of chalk from your coat, find the nearest empty brick wall, and write your own line. We lived. You step back from the brick, wall and watch as your chalked word settles into the city. Quiet, unassuming, but permanent in a way ink can never be. A boy sees it, tilts his head, and grins. He adds his own beside it. We laughed. The wall becomes a mosaic of memories within the hour. Messages from those who stayed, those who returned, and those who are still deciding. We danced. We lost. We kept warm with onions and lies. One reads simply, "Still here." You wander past, now part of something bigger than your own story. At the west end of the street, you find yourself drawn to the same alehouse where you'd once huddled in the dark, sharing frostbitten meat and news of Queen Elizabeth's frostbitten stables. This time, there's no line, no fogged glass, just an open door and a fire that crackles without apology. Inside, it's warmer than you remember, not because of the flames, but because the silence is gone. People talk again, not in whispers, not in grief, just normally, about soup, boots, a neighbour's new ferret, life. You find a seat by the window. It's been cleaned. Someone's polished the glass. You can see the street now. A server passes with a tray of mugs, and when she sets one down in front of you, you blink. It's the same one from weeks ago, the woman who gave you a crust of bread when you hadn't spoken in 2 days. You meet her eyes. She nods once. You made it. So you raise the mug. Not to toast, not to gloat, just to acknowledge the absurd, quiet miracle of still being here. By the hearth, a man with a swollen finger is showing others how to sew better mittens. Stitch from the inside, he says, keeps the wind out. Someone else is teaching a child to play the fiddle using only 2 strings. In the corner, 2 widows argue cheerfully over how to boil potatoes in soot without tasting the soot. They're not just surviving, they're building customs, traditions, things to hand down. And then, From somewhere behind you, a voice begins to speak. It's old, cracked, but deliberate. It's the scholar. You turn slowly as he stands on a crate beside the fire. Someone must have begged him to share something again, and this time he said yes. He clears his throat, opens a soot-edged book and begins to read aloud. Not from scripture, not from laws, but from a diary, his own. The river was a kingdom, and we were all its citizens. For a time we forgot our names and traded them for new ones. Jam seller, rat catcher, snow scribe, fool. And when it cracked beneath us, we did not vanish. We carried the ice in our boots and melted it into memory. No one moves, no one coughs. He reads for 10 more minutes, then closes the book gently. And with that he steps down. A woman claps once, then again. A slow ripple of applause builds, not loud, not demanding, just enough to say, "Thank you for remembering." You step outside into a sky of lavender and ash. Somewhere, bells chime. They're not solemn anymore. They ring because the river didn't win, because you didn't fall through, because even if no one else in the world knows what happened here, London remembers, and you do too. You walk home beneath a sky that's trying its best to look like spring, even if the trees still wear nothing but frost-laced bark. The wind now feels like breath, not blade. Your boots leave tracks in softening mud as you follow the same path you took weeks ago, the same alley past the broken barrel, the same corner where the musician used to play on ice. But now the ground hums differently beneath you. Not silence, not suffering, just wait. Life. Returning. You pass by the tanner's yard where pelts used to freeze stiff as planks. Today they flap lazily on the line. No more snapping in the cold like frightened birds. The smell's still terrible, of course, but even that feels oddly welcome now. A reminder that the world is working again, in all its stinking, stubborn ways. At the baker's, a boy throws open a shutter and waves a tray of rising buns in the air like a victory banner. "Flowers back," he shouts. You hear a cheer from across the lane. You nod and smile. You'll come back later. For now, you need to check on someone. You round the corner and arrive at the crooked house near the church, the one with the cracked lintel and soot-stained glass. You knock, twice. The door opens slowly. It's her, the girl with the frostbitten hands. She's wrapped now in a patched cloak and her cheeks carry colour again. Pink, not purple. She blinks. Then her face lights up with recognition. "You brought me turnips," she says softly. You nod. "How's the cat?" She steps aside and sure enough the cat's there. Older, thinner but still alive. Still glaring. "He stole a pigeon last week," she says with quiet pride. You laugh, and it surprises you how natural it feels. She pours you a cup of broth. It tastes mostly like onion and something charred, but it's hot, and it doesn't come with a warning about rationing anymore. She talks about the frost like it was a fever dream. "I saw a man juggling apples in a cage of icicles," she says. "Was that real?" You smile. "Probably." Outside, the bells ring again. She counts them aloud. 1, 2, 3, and then trails off as you both fall into the kind of silence that doesn't demand words. Just shared breath and the slow thawing of old fears. Eventually you leave her with the rest of your bread and promise to check on her tomorrow. Back on the street, the light has turned amber. Everything seems touched by fire now, brick, cobble and roof. You tilt your face toward the sky and let your shoulders drop. For the first time in weeks, you're not listening for cracks beneath your feet. At the edge of the river, where the ice has all but vanished, a new wooden post has been planted in the earth. Nailed to it is a plaque. No grandstone, no Latin inscriptions. Just 5 words carved into English oak. Here stood the river fair. A boy kneels nearby, digging with a spoon. "Treasure hunt," he mumbles, "looking for old coin." You crouch beside him and hand him a real one. Bury this, you say. Let someone else find it later. He stares at it wide-eyed. Will they think it's ancient? Maybe, you grin. Depends how good your story is. And as he drops it into the mud, you rise again, one last time. The frost is over, but the story will last forever. The street lamp flickers to life as dusk settles in, casting long golden shadows over the water's edge. You stay a little longer, just standing near the post where the river fair is now only a memory in wood. The boy has wandered off, his imaginary hoard buried, his job done. You feel no need to move quickly. The city is uncoiling, stretching its limbs after the long freeze. The pace is slower now, softer, like people have learned to speak in warmer tones and walk without bracing for disaster. You wander along the river bank one final time, boots squelching gently in the muddy thaw, past stone arches and soot-blackened brick. And everywhere you go, the signs of renewal are modest but unmistakable. Wet laundry flapping like surrendered flags, merchants arranging wrinkled apples into neat piles, and laughter drifting faintly from behind cracked shutters. In a narrow alley you've never noticed before, you come across a scrap of painted canvas flapping on a nail. You stop. It's a piece of an old fair banner, torn, faded, smeared with soot. But you can still make out part of the design. A smiling goose wearing a crown, skating across stylized waves. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's perfect. You take it down and fold it into your coat. Let the museums have their coins and records. Let the chroniclers list their dates and deaths. You'll keep the goose. That evening you return home. It feels different now. Not just a shelter, but yours. You light the fire with practiced ease, not desperation. The logs crackle and spit. You don't flinch at the sound anymore. You hang the banner above the hearth, lopsided and scorched. You sit and stare at it as the flames dance beneath. And you think of all the strangers who turned into companions, all the fears that melted into stories, all the absurd, impossible things that somehow became real. In the silence, a question stirs. Was it worth it? Not the suffering, not the hunger, the cold, the loss. That will never be worth it. But the way the city remembered itself, the way people built fires with their last bits of hope and made each other laugh when no one felt like laughing, the way the Thames, frozen and cruel, became a place of joy, if only for a heartbeat. Yes, that was worth something. And tomorrow you'll wake to muddy boots and too much work. You'll find yourself complaining about spoiled onions and crooked shutters and the rat that's stolen your cheese again. But you'll also wake to light through the window. You'll wake to warmth. And when you walk the streets, you'll know something others don't. You were there. You were part of the frost fair. The songs. The burning barrels, the goose feasts, the puppet mice and the books that bled through your gloves. You helped keep the story alive. And now, as the fire softens and your limbs grow heavy, you let yourself drift into that memory. Cool, silver-edged, but no longer cruel. A city on ice, a market on the river, a banner fluttering in the fog. Sleep comes gently, and in that sleep, the frost does not bite. It only glitters. Now that our tale is thawed, and the frost has melted back into memory, it's time to rest your eyes and soften your thoughts. You made it through the coldest winter London had known in generations, walking the frozen Thames beside fools and fishmongers, dancing with marionettes in icicle tents, and sipping broth with strangers who became companions. You witnessed joy in the bleakest corners. You watched the frost fair rise and fade, and you carried its story forward, one small kindness at a time. Let your breath slow. Let the chill of history settle into something warm and distant. Tonight the air around you is not bitter, it is still. The ground beneath you does not crack, it holds, and above, no storm brews. Just quiet skies, and perhaps the faint memory of bells. You're safe now, and as you drift into sleep, perhaps you'll dream of the frost again, but this time, not as enemy, but as stage, a place where the absurd became possible, where people skated not to escape, but to sing. Let that thought carry you gently into rest, and if you find yourself waking in the night, don't worry. Just think of that silly crowned goose sliding across the Thames, and remember, the cold always passes,